On a relentlessly hot summer day, a quiet vigil begins. An old woman wonders aloud what's keeping the girl's father, telling little Thai they'll just wait a bit longer. The child agrees with a cheerful, innocent nod, full of hope. But one day turns into another, and soon, 10 nights have passed. 10 nights since Thee's dad last came home, leaving them to wait in the quiet darkness. Her name is Kim Asthi, and she remembers her father's warm embrace. He was, as the story went, a legendary paladin from the Telosium Empire. A story she believed with all her heart back when she was only 3. But now she's 4, and she knows that if he were a famous hero, they'd surely be rich. The truth is, their family is poor, and her dad worked tirelessly, even on holidays. She remembers asking why her dad had to work every single day. The blunt answer was that his job didn't pay well, a fact she connected to not getting a new sticker book. All her friends from the Quail class went on fun trips to theme parks with their parents. They'd even tell her to make sure she went with her dad, not knowing they'd never been anywhere like that. In those moments, a quiet loneliness would settle in as she watched the other kids play. But Asthi decided she was okay with it, because all the grown-ups in her building loved them. That love, however, was often wrapped in worried whispers about their precarious life. The neighbors would imagine the worst, from deportation to a tragic separation. Still, they all doted on her, calling her a genius for learning to read all by herself. And she clung to her dad's promise, that one day, they'd return to his hometown and build a better life together. She remembered her father's promise, that he would make sure his little Thee smiled every single day. And in her heart, she knew she loved her daddy more than anything in the whole wide world. He was 1,000 times more precious than even the newest sticker book. So, as she drifted off, her only thought was a simple wish for him to come back soon. But the quiet afternoon is shattered when one of the neighbors bursts in, screaming in absolute terror. Asthi's grandmother scolds her for the racket, telling her she's going to scare the child. The neighbor shoves a piece of paper into her hands, and the grandmother's annoyance instantly evaporates. Her eyes go wide with horror as she reads the devastating news, asking what on earth they're going to do. In a flurry of panic, they tell Asthi to stay put and rush out, leaving the little girl all alone. On the table, her innocent drawing of her happy family feels like a cruel joke in the sudden, dreadful silence. All alone now, Asthi's eyes land on the paper they left behind. Her tiny hand reaches out, a tremor of unease already beginning to stir. It's some kind of public notice for funeral services, and the word deceased stands out, though she doesn't fully understand it. Her mind flashes back to her dad, his warm smile, and his promise to come back home. But the paper said deceased. That means a dead person. Why does her heart feel so scared? As the realization begins to dawn, the sky itself weeps, a heavy rain beginning to pour. And then, a sterile white box is placed on the table, her father's remains. Her grandmother gently strokes her hair, telling her she'll be staying at her house tonight. Unable to hold it in any longer, the old woman pulls her close, crying for the poor, innocent child. It's strange she even used her special stickers to wish for her dad to come home. He promised he would make his little Thigh smile every single day. Lying beside her sleeping grandmother, a single thought consumes her. Did he just leave? Her eyes snap open, the devastating question echoing in the silent room. Quietly, she slips out of bed, her small feet carrying her with a heavy purpose. She finds it the white box containing the last pieces of her father. Inside are his things, his wallet, his keys, a pocket watch. But he said they would live together for a long, long time. Tears begin to fall as she remembers his promise to take her to his hometown. But all she has left is a locket, a final proof that he left her all alone. Clutching the locket, little Asthi can only sniffle and hiccup through her tears. She collapses in the darkness, all alone, crying out for the father she misses. Her wails grow louder, and suddenly, the locket in her hands begins to glow. An intense warm light erupts, stunning the child and silencing her cries. A voice emanates from the shining artifact, asking her why she is crying. Asthi stares in disbelief. Was that the rock talking to her? The locket transforms before her eyes, shifting into the shape of a small dragon. A flicker of recognition sparks in her mind as she whispers its name, Tanipang. The little dragon hovers, putting the pieces together, and bluntly asks if that man died. The question hits her like a physical blow, and she breaks down crying all over again. Through her heartbreaking sobs, she wails that her daddy left her all alone. The little dragon nudges her cheek gently, then asks an unbelievable question: what if he could save him? Asthi's crying stops in an instant, her mind struggling to comprehend the offer. He repeats himself, making the deal crystal clear. He'll save her dad, if she promises to stop crying. But the price is astronomical. To do this, she must sacrifice everything she knows. This room, these people, this life. She's just a child, and the words of this pitch-black creature are almost beyond her understanding. He simplifies the offer, promising to send her back to her true home, to a time when her father is still alive. For Asti, the choice is simple. Her daddy is the most precious thing in the world, so she'll go. With newfound determination, she reaches out, vowing to meet her father again. And as her choice is made, a blinding torrent of cosmic energy erupts, tearing reality apart. The blinding light of their pact fades, giving way to a serene and peaceful world. Here, a little girl sleeps soundly, though she looks a little different now. Her dreams are fragmented, filled with memories of a life left behind. Her final, desperate plea to save her dad echoes through her subconscious. And as she blinks awake, the first word on her lips is a hopeful whisper for her father. But a strange voice answers, a boy with intense red eyes asking if she's finally awake. Her mind short-circuits, pure confusion twisting her face as tears start to form. She scrambles back in shock, demanding to know who this person is. Her eyes lock onto the strangest part of him, a pair of twitching, black, cat-like ears. And suddenly, she recognizes them, those errant ears. They're the horns of the dragon, Tanipang. Her fear melts into childlike wonder. She calls him Kakamangpang, amazed that he can turn human, and asks where on earth they are. He calmly explains that this is her dad's hometown, the place she wanted to go to see him. A memory flashes in her mind, her father, telling her stories about this very place, Taloxium. But Tanipang cuts through the nostalgia with a cold dose of reality. No matter his power, he couldn't bring her dad back from the dead. So, he did the next best thing. He brought her to the past 7 years before she was even born. Her 4-year-old brain completely short-circuits. How can she not be born if she's standing right here? The impossible concept slams into her. It clicks. They didn't just move places, they flew backward through time itself. Her eyes sparkle with admiration. He's amazing, just like a legendary puppet mon. Tanipang, however, is less than thrilled with the nickname. He sighs, trying to get her to focus, explaining that this incredible feat has pushed his power to its absolute limit. He had to mess with the very fabric of dimensions, and while she was out, he was busy preparing a safe place. He stops, muttering to himself, realizing he's explaining quantum physics to a 4-year-old. So he simplifies. The important thing is that in this world, her father is definitely alive. But as he shifts back into his dragon form, he drops the other shoe. The father she finds here won't know her. This world is vast, he warns, far bigger than she could ever comprehend. And there's absolutely no guarantee she'll ever even cross his path. Hope begins to falter. But a memory of her father's hand gives her strength. She'll find him, and she'll just explain everything. That's all that matters. The simple, beautiful fact that her dad is alive again fills her with joy. Wiping her tears, she remembers his stories. He was the strongest holy knight, and they all gather in one place. The imperial capital. With a newfound purpose, she grabs the startled dragon and declares their destination. Meanwhile, in a forest near the imperial capital, a wandering mercenary named Basio Derricks eats a miserable meal. He curses his luck. Setting traps all day has been a complete waste of time. The mercenary pulls out a well-worn map, the source of his frustration clear. He knows the pattern all too well. Raid one magic stone, and another just pops up somewhere else. It's an endless, maddening cycle that has flooded the mountains with monsters ever since the stones first appeared. The sheer exhaustion of this unending war shows in his weary eyes. Just yesterday he thought he was going to die, barely managing to survive another brutal encounter. He sighs, feeling the crushing weight of it all. What's the point? Deciding to head back empty-handed, a sudden sound from the woods catches his attention. His eyes widen in disbelief. Could something have actually fallen into his trap? And what he finds isn't a monster, but a little girl in a full-blown panic. She'd been running for ages, only to look back and realize she'd barely moved at all. This world felt huge, and she was just a tiny, lost child within it. If only she had wings, she thinks. But her dragon companion immediately shoots the idea down. He bluntly informs her that he's completely out of power right now. A wave of guilt washes over Asti. He used everything he had just to grant her wish. Eager to make amends, she offers him a special kindergarten-grade shoulder massage. The dragon recoils in absolute horror, wanting no part of her filial piety. He clarifies that even with energy, they couldn't risk teleporting and leaving a magical trail. But as he speaks, the locket around his neck suddenly clatters to the forest floor. Asti panics, seeing her powerful dragon companion revert back into a simple stone locket. But her 4-year-old brain makes a connection. He must be a legendary puppet mon, resting inside his puppet ball. With newfound understanding, she carefully tucks him into her backpack, promising to get to the capital herself. She puffs out her chest and stomps forward with renewed determination, ready to take on the world. That is, until her foot catches a tripwire, and her confidence instantly evaporates into pure terror. From the shadows, a hulking figure emerges, his scarred face grim and his eye glowing with a faint, menacing light. The trap springs, hoisting a wide-eyed Asthi into the air, caught helplessly in a net. The massive man effortlessly lifts his catch, the tiny, sniffling girl dangling beside his blood-stained warhammer. Tears stream down her face as she wails inwardly, convinced she's absolutely doomed without her dragon. But then, trying to be brave, she forces a shaky smile, insisting through her sobs that she's totally okay. Her tearful bravery just leaves the big guy utterly baffled, completely thrown for a loop. The situation makes zero sense to him, a tiny child, alone in a monster-infested forest at night. And to top it all off, she's trying to calm him down, warning that her powerful dad is just around the corner. He smirks, finally getting it. She must be a lost kid who wandered off from her father. He sighs, telling her to hold still so he can get her out, but his movement only sends her into a fresh panic. She screams for her dragon Kekamang to save her, and the man just encourages it, telling her to cry even louder. That actually makes sense to her. A wave of hope washes over Asthi as she starts to truly believe her daddy is here. He watches her with a pained expression, noting how just talking about her dad makes her cry even harder. With a soft thud, he sets her free on the forest floor, telling her to go to her father now. But she just looks back at him, confused. If her dad isn't here, then why isn't he, the kidnapper, kidnapping her? And then it hits him. The matted hair, the dried monster blood, the giant weapon. He looks like the villain here. He quickly tries to explain he doesn't kidnap people, showing her a rope meant for rabbits, which only makes things worse. Realizing his very presence is the problem, he gently places his massive warhammer on the ground. He backs away with his hands up, telling her to hurry and find her dad before something dangerous finds her. Asthi stares for a long moment, this giant, scary man suddenly acting so strange. With a burst of courage, she finally turns and dashes off into the forest. He watches her go, a deep sense of unease telling him he should probably follow her, just in case. But his concern is answered almost immediately by a loud thud as she trips and eats dirt. He stares in complete disbelief. She didn't even make it 3 steps. Through her tears, she calls out to the mister, pointing at her small, scraped knee, now bleeding from the fall. For a moment, the grizzled warrior is completely stunned, his brain failing to process the situation. With a sigh, he finds himself bandaging her tiny ankle as she asks him, of all things, if rabbits taste good. He grunts that meat is just meat, but she insists that cow moo and piggy taste completely different. The way she talks about food, a thought crosses his mind. This isn't some commoner's child. He's had enough. He looks her dead in the eye, demanding to know where her father really is. Her brave face finally crumbles as she nervously admits he's in a place called the capital. The capital? Basio's blood runs cold. Even for an adult, that's a 5-day journey from here. There is absolutely no way a little girl could have made that trip by herself. He presses her, reminding her that she swore her dad was just around the corner, and her reason is just heartbreakingly childish. Her kindergarten teacher told her never to tell a kidnapper the truth. Asthi earnestly lectures him on proper kidnapping etiquette, warning him never to provoke his captor. Basio can only stare, realizing this kid must have had classes on this stuff. She's definitely from a rich family. Everything about her, from her clothes to her speech, screams that she's a well-loved child, and her parents must be frantic. A wave of resolve washes over him. He looks at her and declares he'll take her to the capital. With a surprisingly gentle expression, he offers her a bowl of soup, reminding her that her father is waiting. She takes the warm bowl, her small hands wrapping around it. A brilliant smile lights up her face as she agrees to go, exclaiming that Daddy is waiting for Tien. Basio takes a sip from his own bowl, thinking it works out perfectly since he needed to report a siege-grade magic stone anyway. But as they settle in to eat, Asthi asks what's in the soup, and he gives a one-word answer: carrots. Her face freezes in absolute horror, but he just tells her to eat up. She'll need the strength to see her dad. Bracing herself, Asthi remembers her kindergarten lessons. She has to eat everything to grow up big and strong. But as she takes a hesitant bite, her eyes fly open in utter shock. This is delicious. The carrots are sweet and soft, like jelly. Basio casually asks if she wants another bowl. Yes, she chirps. But as she holds out the empty bowl, she notices something strange at the bottom. There's writing there, and she somehow reads the words, "Daddy, I love you." Basio freezes for a split second, completely caught off guard. But Asthi is lost in her own confusion, wondering how on earth she can read these strange letters. Then it clicks. This isn't the alphabet she learned, and the scary man isn't even speaking her language. It has to be Tanapeng's power. A huge smile spreads across her face as she realizes her little dragon is amazing. She hugs her backpack close, wishing he were here to eat with her so he could get his strength back too. She thinks about seeing her daddy again, and her little dragon too. Drifting off to sleep, she dreams of reaching the capital and finding him right away. They'll all meet him together, her, the scary mister, and even Cloud Kekamong. She'll show her dad the cool bugs she found, and they'll all eat good food. And by eating well, they'll all grow up big and strong, just for him. 4 long days pass, and they finally arrive at the outskirts of the capital. But as they reach the first city gate, Basio is stopped, demanding to know what's going on. A guard calmly explains that the mercenary ID for Baster Perix has been voided. A dark fury flashes in Basio's eyes. His entire identity has just been erased. He's told to go back, and a wave of fear washes over little Asti. Barred from the capital, they find themselves at a nearby inn. Basio slams his fist on the table. Seething with rage, he knows exactly who's responsible: Carl Worvin. But his outburst is cut short by the inn's proprietress, who scolds him while holding a weary Asti. She starts wiping the grime off the little girl's face, telling her not to be a crybaby even as Asti winces from the rough cleaning. It reminds Asti of her own grandmother, a familiar, tough sort of kindness she doesn't really mind. The inn owner calmly approaches, asking Basio to confirm the unbelievable news about his mercenary ID. Basio explains that the Holy Knights must have been bribed. There's no other way his credentials would just vanish. His fury surges again, and he grabs the old man, demanding if he has any clue what he's been through. He roars that he was tackling the 3 magic stones on the outskirts, a plague upon the entire empire. And not only that, he had just conquered one of them and came to report his victory, only to be treated like dirt. But his rant is cut short by a smug-looking man in a Holy Knight's uniform. With a sneer, he informs Basio that the Brywood magic stone has already been reported as conquered by the Deathhound mercenaries. That name hits Basio like a physical blow. Deathhound? The knight leans in, accusingly suggesting he's heard about some small fry trying to steal the Deathhound captain's credit. He points a finger, declaring Basio a shameless liar trying to deceive the Holy Knights, and tells him to get lost. Basio's knuckles crack, his teeth grinding as a single name echoes in his mind: Carl Worvin. He remembers Worvin's face, his promise to take care of everything to protect his family. The full weight of the betrayal crashes down on him, and his rage explodes. A wave of pure killing intent washes over the room, stunning the knights into terrified silence. But then, a tiny hand gently touches his arm, and a small voice calls out to him. With wide, innocent eyes, the little girl asks the terrifying man if he's all right. Her tiny hand on his cheek is enough to shatter his murderous rage. She admits he was making a scary face, but tells him he also looked incredibly sad. The anger drains out of Basio, and he quietly apologizes, realizing their journey will be delayed. But Asti just beams, letting him know that it's perfectly okay. As he leaves, the knights whisper behind his back about the crazy bastard he is. Basio ignores them, already planning his next move: find shelter and uncover the truth. But his frustration erupts again, questioning the insane policy of blocking civilians from the capital. He fumes about the countless refugees who've lost their homes, forced to live in camps outside the walls. His angry monologue is cut short as an old innkeeper tells Basto he's had enough. And while they wait, the innkeeper's wife gets Asti all cleaned up, cooing over how cute she looks. But her husband is less forgiving, grabbing Basio and scolding him for starting trouble again. Basio just slumps over, admitting that the entire situation is just so incredibly frustrating. As he laments the people dying outside the walls, Asti sees that deep sadness return to his face. The old innkeeper's anger finally melts away, realizing the mercenary is just thinking of his hometown. His wife chimes in, offering her sincere condolences for what happened to Van Anra village. But the moment she says that name, something jolts in Asti's memory. The adults turn as she starts to stammer out a single word: ba. Then she points, suddenly remembering something about a place called Banana. The innkeeper corrects her, and Asti excitedly confirms Banana Village is what she meant, asking a stunned Basio if that's his home. Basio is completely baffled, confirming it's his home but wondering how this child could possibly know. But Asti's eyes sparkle with recognition as she proudly announces that she knows Mr. Basto. Her mind flashes back to her father, who once told her stories of his 20 incredibly strong subordinates. He'd laughed, confirming they were all powerful, much better than 100 weaklings. And among them, he said, the one he was closest to was a man he called Mr. Hammer. This man, her father explained, was the vice captain of a mercenary group called the Death Hound, a name that meant the dog of death, a fact that had left little Asti absolutely floored. Her father then revealed that this group was based in Van Anra village, and their captain, Carl, worked Mr. Hammer ragged. She'd giggled at the names, thinking Carl and Hammer sounded like a funny tool set. And now, putting it all together, She looks at the stunned mercenary and declares that her dad knew them both and that they were friends. And suddenly, it all clicks for Asti. Carl betrayed Mr. Hammer, abandoning him and running away all alone. Her father's words echo in her memory, how Carl would just slack off while forcing Basio to do all the hard work. But Basio had left on his mission with complete trust because his captain had made him a promise. Carl swore on their bond that he would personally ensure Basio's wife and daughter were kept safe. Then, one day, the catastrophe they called Doomsday arrived, unleashing hordes of monsters upon the village. She remembers her father's warning that it would be far too dangerous for them to ever return. Just as Basio was away, the villagers screamed in terror as monsters swarmed the town, calling for their captain. And where was the heroic Carl, drunk at a tavern, complaining that the noise was giving him a headache? He stood up, putting on a brave face and ordering everyone home, claiming he would handle the evacuation. But under the pretense of assessing the damage, he loaded up a carriage and secretly fled, leaving them all to die. While the villagers waited for their hero, the monsters descended, and Basio returned to find only bodies. He let out a soul-shattering scream, his world collapsing as he clutched the lifeless forms of his wife and child. Asti explains with a sad look that after this, the man known as Mr. Hammer left the Death Hounds. But the villainy didn't stop there. Because Basio wouldn't follow him, Carl bribed the Holy Knights. With wide-eyed fury, she tells them they deleted the ID that Mr. Basto needs to enter the capital. But then, when he was all alone, Basio met her father, who was the legendary Rank 1 hero. Her dad saw the good man underneath the grief and offered him a new ID and a place by his side. And remembering this story so clearly gives Asti a surge of determination. She has to find him. It all makes sense now. Her dad is the one who can help Basio with his ID problem. But then, a sudden realization stops her to find her dad. She has to go to the capital. And her little 4-year-old brain short-circuits with a devastating paradox. To find her dad, she needs to get into the capital, but she can't get in. The stress of this total dilemma is simply too much for her to bear. And just like that, she's out cold, her little brow furrowed even in sleep. As she rests, Basio gently tucks her in, his mind wrestling with the very same problem. He can't get into the capital, so how can he get her there safely? It seems their time together was destined to be short. He'd have to entrust her to someone else. But as he contemplates this, a pair of glowing red eyes pops out of a nearby backpack. Tanipang, her little dragon guardian, has also been watching over her this whole time. Seeing her sleeping so peacefully, Basio finally lies down to rest as well. In his ethereal form, Tanipang watches over her, wishing they could stay together just a little longer. But he clenches his teeth in frustration. His power is still drained from reversing time for her sake. He gently touches her head, silently vowing to protect her and asking for just a little more time. When morning comes, Asti wakes up, immediately wondering where her new friend Basio has gone. The inn's kind proprietress explains he left early and invites the little girl to come shopping with her. But the marketplace is a chaotic scene, filled with desperate people shouting and struggling to get by. Asti holds the woman's hand tightly, her big green eyes taking in the grim reality of the city. The proprietress sighs, explaining how the recent appearance of magic stones has made everything worse. Seeing a small barefoot child in the crowd, Asti realizes this is exactly what Basio was talking about. And somewhere else, Basio himself rages at the injustice of the capital locking its gates to so many refugees. Her small hand tightens as a thought solidifies in her young mind. This is what it's like for everyone out here. Suddenly, the market's clamor is shattered by an enraged shout from a burly man, accusing someone of trying to steal his wallet. A hooded figure desperately pleads their innocence, insisting it was just an accidental bump in the crowd. But the man isn't interested in excuses, and with a flash of red energy, he throws a vicious punch. Asti's world freezes, her eyes widening in pure disbelief and shock. He shouldn't be hitting them, right? The defenseless person can only cower on the ground. The ugly scene triggers a painful memory, flashing back to the kind lady from room 203. Asti remembers peeking through her door, watching a bad man hurt that woman every single day. But she also remembers that same woman smiling through her bruises, asking about her day and offering her ice cream. And with that memory, Asti's fear hardens into pure righteous anger. People who hit others are simply bad people. With a surge of courage, little Asti throws herself between the bully and his victim, screaming that hitting is bad. The old proprietress can only watch in stunned amusement at the child's sudden heroism. The man, however, is not amused in the slightest, his face contorting in pure rage. What is this damn brat doing? But Asti's small voice was all it took for the silent crowd to finally speak up, telling him to knock it off. He scoffs, puffing out his chest and demanding if these peasants have any idea who he is. That's when the inn's proprietress steps in, shielding Asthi and fixing the man with a stern gaze. She warns him to think carefully, explaining that this area is where people with nothing left to lose come to live. His status, his wealth, it means absolutely nothing here on the desperate fringes of society. All around them, the faces of the crowd darken, their eyes promising a grim fate if he doesn't leave quietly. The man's bravado instantly evaporates, replaced by a cold sweat as he realizes he's in far more danger than he thought. Muttering about his terrible luck, the man shoves his way through the crowd and makes a hasty retreat. As he vanishes, Asthi beams, thinking her granny is the strongest, just as a dark, hooded figure collapses nearby. The man looks up towards the inn, quietly confirming to himself that his room is on the second floor. But the proprietress stops him, demanding to know what he's been doing, having been gone for days. He snarls at her to mind her own business, his ragged voice and crazed eyes startling Asthi. She fires back, scolding his lack of manners and asking if he has any idea what his face looks like right now. Catching his reflection, he recoils in shock, realizing with a curse just how monstrous he appears. Overcoming her fear, little Asthi grabs his cloak, insisting he follow her so she can help him. But as he looks down at her, his eyes ignite with a sinister purple glow. This isn't just a sickness. Her blood runs cold as she stares up at him, a single terrifying thought echoing in her mind. Was this a mistake? The innkeeper's voice cuts in, telling Asthi to eat and ordering the ragged man to wipe his face. Basio scoffs at the command, threatening to smash the washbowl into her face instead. Still, he grabs the cloth, scrubbing his face with furious energy while cursing under his breath. Watching him, a realization finally clicks in Asthi's mind about this strange, mean person. She timidly calls him mean, then asks if he's the one who stole the wallet she heard about. In her innocent mind, she tries to scare him, warning that a tiger will take mean people away. Basio just stares, his brain completely short-circuiting at her bizarre accusation. He slams his fist on the table, roaring in confusion, demanding to know who she's calling miss. First, that pig of a man. Now her. Why does everyone keep mistaking him for a girl? With all the wounded pride a cursed mercenary can muster, he yells that he is a man, you pipsqueak. Asthi is completely stunned by his outburst, trying to process if he's a sister or a brother. Recovering, she explains with sparkling eyes that it's her first time seeing a boy who looks so much like a girl. Just then, the door creaks open, and a burly, rugged-looking man peers into the room. Basio smirks, finally addressing her accusation by holding up the very wallet in question. He explains that the pig-faced man tried to recruit mercenaries, only to run off with the advance payment. The words mercenary corps hang in the air, catching the attention of both Asthi and the newcomer. Basio continues, lamenting that for someone like him, becoming a mercenary is the only way to make a living. Asthi's eyes widen as a critical connection forms in her mind. If they make a corps, could they get an ID card? A brilliant idea explodes in her head, the perfect solution to both their problems. With unwavering conviction, she declares that they should form a mercenary corps, right here and now, with her. Basio stares in utter disbelief, completely thrown by this kid's audacity. He snatches Asthi up, demanding to know what kind of nonsense she's babbling about. He needs experts, not a child. Poking her forehead, he reveals Hez an assassin, questioning where on earth she's seen a mercenary corps run by a little kid. But Asthi counters that she has a legendary puppet mon, and that Mr. Basto is incredibly strong. Basio racks his brain, trying to remember who Hammer even is, clearly not making the connection. A moment later, Asthi's face lights up as she spots the man in the doorway and calls out his name. The burly mercenary steps forward, correcting her. His name is Basto Perix, and he heard they were forming a new corps. Basio can only sneer to himself, already sizing up this newcomer as just another muscle pig. But Asthi waddles right over as Basto confidently claims he can handle a small magic stone on his own. He admits that while Hayes lost his mercenary ID for now, Hayes a veteran who's been in this line of work for a very long time. Basto boasts that years ago, he conquered the Briarwood small magic stone all by himself, as Asthi cheers him on. Basio's expression darkens. That name. The Briarwood small magic stone. He's heard it before. His mind flashes back to the first gate, to the day the immortal Deathhounds returned, led by an arrogant man with an eye patch. Back then, Basio had been in the crowd, pulling up his hood in disgust at their noisy theatrics. He watched as the captain, Carl Worvin, was waved through by the knights. No questions asked, a suspiciously cozy relationship. And he remembers the claim they made that day that their mercenary corps had conquered a small magic stone. Returning to the present, Basio's eyes narrow with suspicion. There's only one stone like that in Briarwood, and he knows who claimed it. But Asthi furiously shouts that he's wrong, that her Mr. Hammer did all the work. She explains the bad sword lied, stole the credit, and even erased Mr. Hammer's ID to ruin him. Basto cuts in, his gaze firm. He says it doesn't matter if Basio believes him, he just needs an ID to prove it all in the capital. He simply states his promise, to take this child to her dad, who's supposedly waiting in the capital. But Basio just stares, completely misreading the room, and blurts out, "Dad?" The realization hits him like a carriage, shouting that Basto was just a lost kid himself, and they look nothing alike. He sizes them up. Yeah, they both look like complete idiots, but something tells him they aren't lying. Suddenly, it all clicks into place. That mercenary corps always felt fishy, and this story explains everything. He lets out a weary sigh. It's a tale as old as time, mercenaries killing each other over a pile of gold. After all, he's been searching for decent teammates for 2 months now, only to get stabbed in the back. Has not about to take on some clumsy Nordhole just end up dying during the entrance exam. That would only delay the money he so desperately needs to make for the children who rely on him. Gritting his teeth, he yanks at his own hair, trapped in a cycle of betrayal and frustration. He slams his fist down, his mind made up as he calls out to the big guy. Fine, they can team up, but the newly introduced Bale Theodore lays down the law. Pull the weight of 1.5 men, or get left in the dust. Basto just hopes Bale himself won't be a burden, asking him to at least be a good runner. And just like that, their incredibly dysfunctional team is formed, much to Bale's visible disgust. The very next morning, they set out on their journey, with Asti absolutely thrilled for their magic stone siege. Bale finds himself dragged along, questioning every life choice that led to him holding a tiny swinging child's hand. But Asti is in her element, proudly listing the strengths of her new team, the strong Mr. Hammer and the pretty brother. Bale just stares, completely baffled by this kid's endless and frankly, irritating excitement. Her list of powerhouses continues, including the legendary Blackie hiding out in her little pink backpack. And of course, there's herself, the undisputed champion of the Quail class race, and a master of tag. She happily remembers her glory days, how she could catch everyone in a game of tag. And with that flawless logic, she declares she'll catch all the monsters too. Asti runs ahead, assuring her 2 new guardians that they have nothing to worry about. She puffs out her chest, proudly proclaiming that she is, in fact, super strong. But her charge is cut short as a firm hand grabs her by the scruff of her dress. Basto's voice cuts through her fantasy, informing her that she is not going to be catching monsters. The little girl's entire world comes to a screeching, dramatic halt. He tells her this isn't a game, then asks her what she's most afraid of in the world. After a moment, she timidly answers a Tyrannosaurus. Basto has no clue what that is, but he promises her the monsters they're facing are much, much scarier. His warning conjures a horrifying vision of her 2 protectors being overwhelmed in the darkness. The monsters here, he explains, are at least 10 times scarier than anything she can imagine, a thought that sends her spiraling. To keep her safe, Basto reveals he's hired someone, an old diviner, from a group called Nordics Omen. He tells Asti to wait quietly with the old man, and the terrified girl can only manage a small, okay. Basto assures the diviner they'll return before dawn, feeling a sense of trust since the inn owner recommended him. With her bravado gone, Asti realizes she was being careless. Even her own father had told her monsters were scary. She remembers him lecturing her that monsters have countless attack methods, so a hero can't afford to be a brat. Taking the lesson to heart, she puffs up her chest and proudly declares that she will wait quietly. Bale finds this adorable, smirking as he tells her not to start crying the second they leave. She instantly bristles, insisting she's not a baby, only for him to flatly point out that yes, she is. Bale mercilessly reminds her how she was crying and begging when she first met Basto. She absolutely explodes, yelling that adults only call her a baby to ignore her. He just keeps teasing, calling her a dummy, so she puffs up and boasts she's first in her class. Basto has to step in, telling them it's enough, it's time to go. Her anger vanishes as she gives a small, sad wave goodbye to Uncle Basto. He gives her a knowing nod before turning to leave with his partner. But just as they head out, Bale is suddenly yanked to a halt. He whips around, furious, demanding to know what the big idea is. It's Asti, with a surprisingly serious look, telling him to be careful too. Bale's irritation melts into a smirk. This funny kid is starting to grow on him. As they journey on, Bale guesses the kid might be a noble, but Basto finds the whole story suspicious. Their path leads them to the ominous entrance of Tenebrum Cave, once a food storehouse, now a monster den. Bale lights their way with a lantern, baffled at how his partner can be so hung up on a simple name. Basto can't get it out of his head, she said. Her father's name was Kim Young-soo, a format completely alien to him. He mutters to himself as they walk deeper. No noble in this world would ever have a name like that. Bale dismisses it, questioning how they could ever find her dad with such useless, childish info anyway. In his mind, everything about these two is weird, especially Basto, a man he learned was a former captain of the infamous Death Hounds. He glances over at the man. A tragic past, sure, but if Basto's legendary skills are real, this is a golden opportunity. The cave's interior is a disorienting maze, with small magic stones sprouting in every abandoned warehouse. Focusing up, Bale reaffirms their simple plan. Raid the closest stone and leave. He's ready to work for it. Basto grips his hammer, his eyes glowing with equal determination. He's ready. But before they can move, dark, sinister cracks begin to splinter across the ceiling. The fissures erupt into a chaotic web of purple energy, consuming the entire warehouse. Both men look on in horror. This isn't the energy of a small magic stone. This is something else entirely. Bale, ever the pragmatist, immediately turns and makes a run for it. Basto yells after him, confused by his sudden retreat, but his partner is already gone. Bale's eyes are wide with terror. He saw what was forming behind Basto. A medium magic stone is sprouting, and his only instinct is to scream for them to run. Far away from the unfolding disaster, a mysterious old man stirs from his slumber. He sits watch over their camp as little Asthi, clutching her backpack, whispers their names in worry. She wonders if they'll be okay, clutching the locket and whispering for Kakamong to wake up. There's just so much she needs to tell her sealed friend, her voice a quiet plea to the night. But a sudden violent tremor rips through her senses, a shockwave of pure dread. In the distance, the sky erupts in a cataclysmic explosion of purple and orange energy. Her heart plummets as she screams their names, Uncle Basto, Bale, that's where they were. Before the shockwave hits, the old diviner moves like lightning, grabbing the kid and shielding her. He holds her tight against the roaring inferno, realizing this is far worse than he imagined. From the epicenter of the blast, a monstrous beast of fire and shadow claws its way into existence. The diviner shoves Asthi behind him, yelling for her to run while he draws its attention. She can only stare in horror, frozen on the spot, as he urges her to get away. Nearby, Basto crawls desperately through the grass, trying to escape the inferno. Asthi finally breaks from her paralysis, sprinting into the dark woods as fast as her little legs can carry her. But she can't resist a glance back, her mind screaming in denial. Her eyes widen in pure, unadulterated terror at the scene unfolding. She sees Basto collapse, the life draining from him as the flames lick at his heels. Bale roars in defiance, bloodied but still fighting against the encroaching shadows. Then, a monstrous claw descends, tearing through Basto's back without a hint of mercy. A horrifying vision floods her mind. Basto, Bale, even Grandpa Nordic, all being ripped apart. It's happening again. Everyone she cares about is going to die, just like that day. Her thoughts snap back to reality just in time to see the diviner get slammed into the earth. She collapses to the ground, crushed by the weight of her own helplessness. Thee can't do anything. Clasping her hands together, she desperately begs, a silent plea to anyone who will listen. Tears streaming down her face, she screams that she can't bear to say goodbye to anyone else. And as her grief reaches its peak, a strange, ethereal energy begins to swirl around her fists. A power not of light or hope answers her call, manifesting as a sinister, grinning skull. Back in the fight, Bale is being absolutely mauled, blood flying as claws rake his body. He grits his teeth, letting out a furious roar at these damn monsters. Basto fares little better, swinging a massive hammer to create some breathing room. He smashes one of the beasts aside with a brutal, bone-shattering crunch. But another lunges in the opening, sinking its fangs deep into his arm as he cries out in agony. Meanwhile, Basto stares at the source of the demonic energy, his mind reeling. Just days ago, this was nothing. Now, an endless tide of monsters is pouring out, far too many for them to handle. He pants, realizing with dawning horror that there's no way the two of them can survive this. With his spirit broken, he fumbles for a small vial, his hands trembling. He'd rather take poison and leave this world than be eaten alive by these foul creatures. But just as he raises the vial, a brilliant flash of light smashes into the fray. A spectral, skeletal fist caves in a monster's skull with devastating force. The raw power of the blow sends shockwaves through the air, obliterating the demon. Suddenly, an entire legion of the dead rises from the ground around them. The summoned skeletons charge, crashing into the demonic horde with a clatter of bone and steel. Basio sits stunned amidst the carnage, his mind reeling from the impossible sight. He tries to make sense of it, realizing the screams he heard were coming from underground. Suddenly, Basto yanks him up by the collar, snapping him back to reality. He furiously demands answers, accusing Basio of hiding his identity as a powerful mage. But Basio is just as lost, shouting back that he thought Basto was the one who saved them. The mercenary's hand still trembles, tightly gripping the poison he was seconds from drinking. If neither of them cast the spell, he wonders with dawning horror. Then who did? This was no ordinary magic, it was necromancy, a forbidden art that raises creatures of darkness. As they stand in the eerie silence, the two men can only grasp that they witnessed something from forgotten legends. And nearby, the terrifying caster of this spell has already begun its search. A cold sweat runs down their backs as Basio and Basto realize the caster is still out there, hiding in the shadows. The undead servants begin their search, sniffing the air with an unnerving, predatory focus. The men can't wrap their heads around it. Why would a necromancer save them? What could they possibly want? Suddenly, their attention is drawn to a faint light and a small sound rustling in the nearby bushes. It's the tiniest hiccup, barely a sound, but in the dead silence of the forest, it's a gunshot. The skeletons converge and part the leaves, revealing not a monster, but a tiny, tearful girl holding a skull. Her fear melts into a wave of relief as she bursts into tears, wailing their names out loud. Basio and Basto are completely stunned as the child cries that she thought they were all going to die. One of the skeletons even awkwardly pats her head, a bizarre attempt to comfort its distraught master. The two hardened mercenaries can only stare, their brains short-circuiting at the impossible truth before them. Having just saved their lives, Asti decides to affectionately nuzzle one of her new skeleton pals. But then she pivots, suddenly scolding her undead minions for using bad words against the big scary men. Her childish lecture somehow manifests as a psychic slap, knocking Basio for a loop. Just then, another figure emerges, an old, wounded man being helped along by one of the very same skeletons. Asti's face lights up with pure joy. It's Grandpa Nordicha, just like her bony friends promised. Basto can only stand there, his brain completely fried, as this surreal situation keeps escalating. She explains with perfect 4-year-old logic. Her friends live in the ground, so of course they know everything. One of the skeletons tries to offer her the monster cores, but she just cocks her head, having no idea what they are. Nordique approaches the two stunned mercenaries, his first concern being whether they are safe, but his eyes drift back to the little girl. A dreadful realization dawning, could she truly be the necromancer? Basto stares, his mind reeling as the truth settles in the child is the summoner. He remembers seeing no hint of this power when they first met, even as Asti happily hugs a skeleton skull. She then announces that her beep friends have gathered all the monster cores for them. Running over, she asks if they really need these shiny rocks for their mercenary test, and Basto can only stammer out a yes. Her skeletal minions dutifully drop the sack of cores at their feet, a silent offering. Basio looks out in utter shock. The rift, the monsters, everything all gone because of her. While the mercenaries are having a meltdown, Asti happily sorts her loot with a bony helper. Nordice watches with a grim expression, confirming she's a child born with terrifyingly powerful magic. Basio and Basto can only exchange looks of pure, unadulterated shock. The old man kneels, praising the amazing child, whose power must have blossomed on its own, only for Asti to ask, "What's an ability?" Nordique tries to explain that most mages awaken their powers as teenagers, if they're lucky. Basio cuts him off, yelling that for a kid her age to do this, it makes her the strongest. But the words amazing and strongest just leave Asti completely confused. Then, a little light bulb seems to go off in her head. She remembers her dad, flexing his arm and proudly declaring he was the strongest paladin. With a sudden burst of understanding, she stomps her foot and declares that blood is thicker than water. One of her skeletal minions even seems to clack its jaw in emphatic agreement. The three grown men can only stare, totally bewildered by her sudden proverb. Asti looks around furtively, as if about to share a world-shattering secret. She leans in and whispers that her daddy is super strong, the strongest in the entire world. She proudly proclaims her daddy is an insanely strong holy knight, stunning the three men. Basto recalls his earlier suspicions. Finding a child alone in this forest never sat right with him. He realizes that if she's telling the truth, then this is no ordinary lost little girl. The world has two fundamental powers: holy power, which knights use to empower their swords, and mana, which mages weave into all kinds of spells, two forces in direct opposition. While they ponder this, Asti is just curiously tapping on the skull of her skeletal minion. Basio's face hardens. A holy knight's child awakening mana is a legendary and ill-omened rarity. Superstition claims such children are cursed, destined to bring ruin upon their own house. But if her parents truly are the strongest holy knights, his mind zeroes in on a terrifying conclusion. There's only one family in the Empire with that title, the noble and untouchable House of Lumen. Nordice and Basio exchange a look, their minds racing with the implications of her noble lineage. But Asti, hesitant to even bring it up, begins to tell a very different story. She paints a picture of a simple life, with her father, in a small, cozy home. Nordichi's mind screeches to a halt. A small house? For the Grand Duke Lumen? That makes no sense. She happily demonstrates just how tiny the room was, describing cold winter showers with a smile. To her, it was perfect. Even with just the two of them, it felt like she had 100 family members. But then, the happy memory fades, a single tear welling in her eye as she admits her dad left her. The men's expressions soften, their grand theories dissolving into simple pity for a lost child. All alone, she was left in the forest with just her locket, her friend Kekamang now sleeping inside. And Nordich realizes the skull she's holding isn't a toy, it's a permanent summon, a power she awakened without even knowing it. She hugs the skull, filled with a simple, childlike faith that Kekamang will help her find him. With renewed determination, she announces her grand plan. She'll pass the test and go to the capital to find her dad. The men are completely lost. Basio can't wrap his head around it. What kind of father wouldn't remember his own daughter? Asti tries to explain, her voice small, that Kekamang's magic turned back time to before her dad ever knew her. Tears well up in her eyes as she insists her dad didn't abandon her, that he probably wants to see her too. But the only part they hear is that magic erased her from his memory, and the revelation hits them like a thunderclap. Basio grabs the others, his mind racing with a horrifying new theory. Someone used magic to tear a child from her father's mind. And it all clicks into place, the noble and virtuous Holy Night House Lumen, a place of power and secrets. They imagine her father fleeing his prestigious family, choosing a humble life in a stable just to be with her, only for some cruel enemy to find them and viciously rip the memory of his own daughter from his mind. They'd left this tiny child alone in the forest to die. The realization sends a shockwave of horror through the three grown men. This is insane, a little girl, wandering alone with nothing but a skull for company. Basio's fury erupts, grabbing Nordiche as he roars, "Are they worse than beasts?" Basto, the only one keeping a level head, tries to strategize, saying they must hide her identity for now. But Basio is having none of it, screaming that those monsters can't be allowed to get away with this. The others try to calm him down, but he just sees them as cowards, refusing to take a stand. Then, in a flash, he turns his full, intense attention to the startled little girl. There's no rule saying a 4-year-old can't join the mercenary group. He explains that it just means she'll be the first, a concept that flies right over her little head. Basto immediately grabs her, laying down the hard truth: power or not, a 4-year-old can't officially join. But his expression softens. She's looking for her dad, right? So they're going to find a way, no matter what. Basio's voice is thick with emotion, agreeing that since she saved all of them, they owe her a debt they can never repay. The old mage, Nordiche, nods in silent, heartfelt agreement. They are all bound to help her now. All this praise makes little Asti blush, stammering that she didn't really do anything special. The mood shifts, and they tell her that her necromancy ability must be kept an absolute secret from here on out. But Asti reveals a secret of her own, one so shocking it makes the mercenary's blood run cold that she was erased from her dad's memories by magic. Tears stream down her face as she defends him, insisting he didn't want to do it, and probably misses her too. Basto quickly tries to get things back on track, brainstorming how to hide her identity since her power is such an asset, even joking about just carrying her in a bag. A suggestion Asti immediately rejects with a full-throated, teary-eyed scream. Asti's little mind tries to process their words, comparing hiding to how animals avoid predators. But wait, if she hides, how will she ever find her dad? Meanwhile, Basio mulls over the very real danger they're in. She decides she doesn't want to hide. She wants to be scary, just like Uncle Basto, so no one can mess with her. A spark ignites in her eyes. Hide her ability but still be scary? The gears in her 4-year-old brain start turning. She remembers her own grandmother, a seemingly frail old woman who was secretly a powerhouse. That's it, a hidden powerhouse. She finally understands the concept. Basio glances back, catching her sudden excitement and calling out to Basto. With a brilliant flash, Asti proudly declares she has a very good idea, holding up a skull as Exhibit A. A few days pass, and the unlikely group arrives at the gates of a bustling city. But Basio, Nordiche, and Basto can only stare ahead in utter, slack-jawed confusion. And the source of their confusion is Asti's brilliant idea, which they are now forced to enact. The plan is simple, and utterly insane. They'll just lie and say Asti isn't actually a 4-year-old. In fact, she's a super hairy old man transformed into a child, and she will be their figurehead boss. Asti, for her part, is completely on board, eagerly embracing her new role as a hidden powerhouse. And so, they arrive at the mercenary guild, slapping down a heavy bag of proof of their skills. The guild official's eyes widen in shock as he pulls out a rare Lyclops core. Basto smugly lists their impressive haul, confident it's more than enough for a registration test. The official's gaze, however, drifts past the mountain of a man that is Basio, and lands on the frail old man and the youth who looks barely out of his teens. How could they have hunted these? His suspicion boils over. Surely they stole these. Flanked by guards, he demands to know who they really are. But his accusations are cut short by a sound from below, and he scoffs at the apparent rudeness. A small cloaked figure slams a staff down, demanding he show some respect to the great archmage and necromancer. The official peers over his desk, his brain stuttering as he sees a tiny child. Before he can process it, the floor shatters as a glowing skeletal hand erupts from the ground. The entire guild hall erupts into chaos, the staff screaming in pure terror at the sudden undead monstrosity. A full skeleton emerges, a creature of pure darkness, and the official wonders who could have summoned such a thing. But the little girl simply turns, her voice echoing as she commands her creation to fall in line. The massive skeleton obediently steps behind the tiny necromancer, a silent and terrifying guardian. The guild staff trembles, the impossible truth dawning on them that little girl is the summoner. Eyes wide with fear and awe, the head official demands to know exactly who this child is. Basio immediately steps in, roaring with theatrical fury at the official's insolence. But the tiny, hooded Asthi calmly raises a hand, ordering her subordinate to stand down. Basto plays his part perfectly, shrinking back as if chastised, and the whole crew commits to the intimidation tactic. Of course, this entire performance was rehearsed, as we see in a flashback of Tanipang questioning if she could really act the part. He'd advised her on everything, from her menacing robes to her serious demeanor, as she psyched herself up. Basto even gave her line readings, instructing her on how a powerful necromancer should command her minions. Back in the present, Asthi channels that coaching, her voice dropping into a menacing whisper as she asks if he truly wants her name. The guild official is completely paralyzed with fear, buying the terrifying act, hook, line, and sinker. Internally, however, her companions are cracking up. Tanipang thinks her flubbed line is hilarious, while Basto despairs. And beneath the hood, Asthi is sweating bullets, desperately trying to maintain her hidden powerhouse persona without breaking character. Doubling down, Asthi declares that he cannot handle her true name, for she is the Necromancer King. An oppressive dark aura erupts, sending waves of pure terror through the guild officials. Completely broken, the head official meekly agrees to register their mercenary corps with the information provided. He tells the group to wait for just a moment, his voice now laced with fear and respect. As soon as he's out of earshot, the tension breaks. Basto celebrates their success while Basio praises Asthi for her convincing performance. Basto explains that the act was so perfect they immediately saw her as a powerhouse and didn't dare pry any further. Nordiche sighs in relief, confessing he was prepared to join just to meet the minimum headcount if they'd been rejected. He asks if he might stay with them to repay his debt, and Basio happily welcomes the old man into their ranks. With a grateful heart, Nordiche vows his loyalty to the Necromancer King who saved his life. He then turns to Asthi, telling her she should start thinking of a name for their new mercenary group before the paladin returns. Asthi freezes, realizing she was so focused on her grand performance she forgot a name. Panicking, she blurts out the first thing that comes to mind, the Quail class? Basto nearly leaps out of his skin, absolutely mortified by the suggestion. He objects loudly, but their little debate is cut short as the official returns to the table. The man announces their registration is complete, cautiously noting he's listed her as a dark attribute mage. But his professional curiosity wins out, and he nervously asks for more details about the Necromancer King. The question sends Asthi's mind reeling back to a conversation she had with Basio. He had warned her that the official might try to pry for information beyond their script, and he had assured her that in that moment, she had no obligation to answer a single thing. In her memory, Basio explained how the Empire's very existence depends on mercenaries. Because of this, the guild isn't in any position to force information from those who wish to keep it secret. Basto and Nordiche had agreed. It was common for mercenaries to hide or even forge their identities. He'd even suggested a simple plan. If anyone gets too curious, just lean into the mystery. And so, back in the present, Asthi addresses the official not as a clerk, but as a knight. A skeletal hand forms on her armrest as she asks why he thinks this tiny body is her true form. The official snaps, stammering apologies as Asthi silently exhales, her dangerous bluff having landed perfectly. But the man then delivers some regrettable news, citing an instruction he cannot ignore. An identification number for Basto Perix cannot be issued, all thanks to a report filed by Carl Worvin. Nordiche reads the official document aloud. It accuses Basio of illegal acts and fleeing after extortion. Basio can barely contain his seething anger, his mind reeling. He stole what? The official just shrugs helplessly, claiming he only knows that higher-ups deemed his behavior inappropriate. With a slam of his fist, Basio roars that it was Carl who did all of that. Carl who stole their pay. He realizes the depth of the setup. They erased his ID without any investigation, a mockery of justice. The name Carl Worvin echoes in his soul, a raw scream of a man who's already lost his family to this monster. Nordiche watches with grim understanding, wondering who in power is protecting a man like Carl. Basto is furious, shouting what they're all thinking. Just how much was the bribe to make this happen? The guild official simply stands there, his silence a confirmation that his hands are tied by corruption from above. Asti silently processes the word echoing in the room. A bribe. Her mind flashes back to a simpler time, watching TV with her grandmother. She remembers a neighbor explaining how people hide dirty money in luxury gifts. As a child, she'd been so confused by the idea of bribes involving apples. But now, it all clicks into place using money to make people do what you want. Her eyes flare with sudden rage. That's how Carl is getting away with hurting her friends. The guild official finally breaks his silence, admitting he already knows their situation. Basio roars in disbelief, demanding to know why he's just standing by if he knows the truth. With a tired sigh, the official explains Carl didn't bribe some low-level grunt. Bastos' expression darkens. He's talking about the new commander, the one the emperor personally appointed. The official glances around, lowering his voice to reveal the sensitive information. He explains that this commander is so unpopular, even the knights complain about his constant interference. Bastos scoffs in frustration, as if complaining would ever get an imperial appointee fired. The official can only guess that for them to go this far, Carl must have paid an astronomical sum. Basio's back is turned, but the realization hits him hard. It all comes down to money. The sheer absurdity of the situation has Bastos seething with impotent rage. Nordich closes his eyes, the grim reality of their situation sinking in. Basio's curse flares as his fury boils over. Money? Carl stole everything from them, and this was his only path to avenge his family. Seeing him on the verge of losing it, Basto tries to get him to step back and cool down. But suddenly, Asti steps forward, her voice ringing out, demanding to know the exact price of their betrayal. The sudden, sharp question from the small child leaves the official completely bewildered. Asti slams her tiny fist on the armrest, her voice booming as she demands to know how much that dog Carl paid them. A memory, or perhaps a whisper from Tanipang, surfaces rumors of an entire crate of banknotes. An idea sparks in her mind. A crate full of cash? That's all? She thinks to herself that if that's their game, she's about to win with something far better. With a grin, she unzips her little pink backpack, and a torrent of brilliant jewels and treasures pours out. These weren't just any riches. They were the welcome gifts her loyal friends had given her. She flashes back to that first meeting in the forest, crying as her skeletons tried to console her with shiny things. But she'd been in a hurry then, running to save Basio and Basto, telling her undead entourage she'd take their gifts later. And now, in the present, she calls on the power of those gifts, ready to turn the tables. Floating in an aura of power, Asti declares that the great Necromancer king will give them far more than a petty bribe. She scoffs at their corruption, asking if they really sold their souls for a single box of cash. Her intimidation works perfectly, as an official slides over the registration papers, complete with a new ID number for Basio. Basio stares in utter disbelief, his voice cracking as he realizes their desperate plan actually succeeded. The guild official, now all business, informs them the final step is to simply write down their mercenary group's name. Basto panics slightly looking at the form, but Asti just scoffs, completely unfazed by the pressure. With an adorable and determined look, she announces the name she has chosen for them all, Agabert. Nordiche and Basto are stunned, wondering how she came up with such a surprisingly cool name on the spot. But her inner monologue reveals the truth. She just saw the name of the top-ranked guild on the board. Travaga spelled backwards is Agabert. She's a genius, right? The official confirms the name, wishing their new Necromancer king the best of luck. Asti's eyes sparkle with delight. She absolutely loves her new, fearsome title. With their registration complete, the new mercenary group Agabert finally leaves the guild hall. Basio leans down, his voice cracking with emotion as he whispers a heartfelt thank you to her. He's overwhelmed, struggling to process that this little girl has given him his life back. She looks up, innocently pointing out that his eyes are all red from holding back tears. A wave of pride washes over her. She feels just like her dad, helping someone in need. But Tanipang quickly chimes in, reminding her that the great Necromancer king can't get sentimental. Back on Basio's shoulders, she snaps back into her role, declaring it's time for a celebratory meal. He smiles, accepting his king's command, and makes a silent vow to find her father as repayment. Meanwhile, word of their exploits is already spreading to the port town of Pearl City. A red-haired woman barrels through the streets, shouting about breaking news. She slams into a tavern, trying to wake her leader, who's passed out on the bar. She's got huge news. A brand new mercenary group just passed through the gate. But her comrade scoffs, wondering why she's making a scene over some random rookies. He chides her for bothering their captain with such unimportant gossip, but the man lifts his head, revealing the sharp eyes of Tessaton Baronio, leader of the mercenary group Travaga. Livia is furious, yelling that this is a massive scoop and they need to listen. Her crewmate Victor just shouts back that her news is probably worthless. Tessaton, however, calmly listens, realizing that a very interesting oddball has just appeared on the scene. A Travaga member with glasses calmly explains that the new mercenary isn't just anybody there, a powerful mage. The entire tavern erupts, a man nearly choking on his food at the news. A mage forming their own corps? Victor reflects on just how rare mages have become, a class of beings often called monsters for their immense power. The man with glasses continues, dropping an even bigger bomb. This particular oddball wields the attribute of darkness. While he can't be 100% certain, the proof is in the rumors. They summoned a horde of skeletons at the guild. Necromancy? The patrons can hardly believe it. That was magic they thought only existed in theory. Tessaton quietly swirls his drink, his mind racing. He's heard the stories, but to think it was actually real. He looks up, his expression sharp and serious, demanding to know if this information is verified. Livia slams down a report, proudly stating her intel is solid. She dug it out of the Holy Knight's own network. She gloats, but her comrades are stunned. A mage starting their own mercenary group. What a truly bizarre situation. Tessaton grins, realizing this new group is either insanely confident or terrifyingly powerful. He reads the name of their mercenary band, committing Agabert to memory. Scanning the roster, he dismisses a few of the members as complete nobodies. But then a name stops him cold. Basio Derricks, the former vice captain of Deathhound. Alright, now for the main event. He eagerly searches for the Necromancer's identity. He frantically flips through the document, a flicker of confusion on his face. A slow, wicked grin spreads across his lips. The mage's real name isn't even listed. He erupts into manic laughter, absolutely floored by the sheer absurdity of the intel. This mage is not just hiding their identity. They're a 4-year-old kid using the alias Necromancer King. His companion scoffs, calling them a lunatic for anointing themselves with such a grandiose title. Tessaton smirks at his crew, telling them to get nervous so they don't get outshined by some creepy new mage. But his taunts draw the fury of another captain, the Grim Reaper of the Rank 2 Mercenary Corps. He roars that Tessaton is only acting cocky because he's number 1, but that glory won't last. A bold threat, considering Travaga has never once dropped from the top rank, making Tessaton the strongest. And to the number 1 mercenary, this little outburst is just amusing. He rises, towering over his rival, and asks if Reaper really thinks he can take the top spot. The insult strikes a nerve, leaving the Grim Reaper speechless with pure, unadulterated rage. Tessaton just taps his head, condescendingly adding that it takes brains, not just brawn, to be number 1. With a final threat, he warns Reaper to stay out of his way, or he'll never see another Mana Stone again. Left in their wake, the humiliated captain can only tremble with fury, calling him an insufferable bastard. Outside the city gate, at a cozy inn, Asthi finally gets a moment to herself. She's happily munching on a cookie when Basto approaches, teasingly addressing her as the Necromancer King. The title catches her off guard, and she looks up in confusion as he playfully asks if there's any other king around. She whines that he can just call her Thee when they're alone, breaking her fearsome persona completely. Basto can't help but burst out laughing at the adorable contrast, while Asthi blushes from the attention. Leaning in with a smirk, he asks if she secretly enjoys being called the Necromancer King. As he gives her a little poke on the cheek, she thinks it over. Does she like the alias? Of course she does. In her mind, all the strongest, coolest characters have epic nicknames. It's just like back in her old world, where her friend became a legend with a cool skin for his game character. She tries to explain this brilliant logic, but Basto is utterly lost, leaving her to wonder if maybe he's just a little dumb. Her train of thought is broken when she sees Uncle Basto and Grandpa Nordic have returned. Basio walks in with the old man, asking how she got on with someone named Vale. But Asthi's attention is fixed on the cloth in his arms, excitedly realizing it's their new mercenary corps cloak. With a proud flourish, Basio presents the brand new Agabert uniform emblazoned with a very sparkly, very pink cartoon bunny. Her eyes practically turn into stars. It's more amazing than she ever could have imagined. It's Tunapang. The legendary character from her past life is now their official symbol. Basto, however, is absolutely disgusted. grabbing the cloak and demanding to know why they put this pink bug on it. The insult strikes her like lightning. Did he just call her beloved Tonopang a bug? Basio calmly explains that since Asti is the captain, her authority and choices must be followed. But Basto can't let it go, calling it a moldy bug as Asti crumbles, her dream design utterly trashed. She remembers drawing it with Nordicha, arguing over which character was the best. This design is precious to her. But Basto has had enough, declaring he's just going to erase the ugly thing himself. In a flash of pure rage, Asti leaps forward and bites down hard on his arm. He yanks his hand back in disgust, but she yells that she's a child, not a dog. Basto doesn't care. Hez doing his job, and that damn child isn't stopping him. She screams, grabbing at his clothes in a desperate last-ditch effort to pull him back. The inkwell flies from his hand, shattering against the wall in a messy black explosion. But something's wrong. Basto stares at his hand, confused, as blood begins to drip from his fingers. A dark, leathery wing suddenly materializes, and a cold voice speaks of insubordination. It's Tanipang, in a monstrous new form, emerging to punish the one who dared to defy the captain. Asti freezes, her eyes wide with shock, as blood drips from Basto's wounded hand. The culprit reveals himself a tiny, muscular dragon form of Tanipang, looking utterly pleased with himself. Basto slowly turns his head, his voice dangerously calm as he looks at the little girl. He gets right in her face, a menacing grin spreading as he asks if she ordered her summon to attack him. But before he can intimidate her further, a firm hand yanks him back by his cloak. It's Basio, telling him to back off and reminding him that her power is still new and unstable. Basio's eyes narrow with a clear warning. Don't start something you can't finish, because you will lose. From the sidelines, Tanipang smirks, thoroughly enjoying the escalating tension he created. Basto's rage boils over into a manic grin, realizing the little creature is actually laughing at him. But it's Asti who interrupts, grabbing Basto's sleeve, her fear replaced by fury as she declares she won't forgive this either. Asti's fury erupts, not at Basto, but at her tiny companion he's going to the room of truth. She holds the little dragon down, who seems entirely unbothered by her righteous anger. Up in their inn room, she begins to lecture him based on the most serious rules she knows, kindergarten rules. She lays out the scenario: a friend gets hurt, and tattling ensues. If it's an accident, you have to reflect until you earn an IMSAD sticker to be freed. But her face darkens. Hurting someone on purpose, she warns him, is a much bigger crime. Tanipang's response to this grave warning is a loud, incredibly bored yawn. He then just plops onto his side, completely dismissing her, leaving Asti stunned. She demands to know who gave him permission to lie down during a scolding, but he just looks up at her. His simple reply, "It's my choice," completely shatters her worldview. That's not how apologies work. But Tanipang isn't having it, pointing out that she bit that guy too. The accusation hits Asti like a lightning bolt, her entire argument crumbling in a flash. She stammers, trying to defend herself. It wasn't a hard bite. Not really. But then the dragon's tone softens, and he admits, she did well. Surprisingly well. He never thought she could handle so much on her own, and a hint of pride swells in his chest. Then his gaze darkens, and he confesses that he's the truly pathetic one here. It wasn't that he used too much power, he admits with a heavy sigh, it's just that he's weak. So, he lays out a new plan. She will continue to act as the Necromancer King to hide her identity. And as for him, he wants his true nature hidden too, letting everyone think he's just a simple summon. Asti looks at her small companion, a sudden realization dawning on her he has his own secrets to protect. And with a determined look, Asti agrees they will protect each other's secrets. But as she calls him Blackie, he finally cuts her off. That is not his name. In a flash of light, he takes his human form and properly introduces himself. Rukarian. The name hangs in the air, a profound gesture of trust that leaves her completely stunned. In that moment, she remembers everything he's done. He gave her this chance to see her dad again. Overwhelmed with gratitude, she launches herself at him, tearfully shouting his real name. She holds him tight, thanking him for putting everything on the line just for her. Rukarian is frozen solid, completely unprepared for this sudden, raw display of affection. The touching scene is abruptly cut short by a sniffle as she pulls back with a runny nose. Shaking off the awkwardness, he sets their new course. Tomorrow, they find her father in the capital. To protect his identity, Asti declares that from now on, she'll just call him Blackie. The mighty dragon is not a fan of the new nickname, but she's already dragging him away for his next task. As she pulls him by the hand, a sudden, sharp realization cuts through his thoughts. He recognizes this power, this specific, overwhelming energy flowing from her. It was her magic that day, the desperate cry that had violently awakened him from his eons-long slumber. But his profound epiphany is completely lost on the little girl leading him forward. She happily runs down the stairs to the mercenaries, announcing that Blackie is ready to apologize. Basto stares back, completely unimpressed, and sarcastically remarks that he doesn't see anyone capable of apologizing. Asti panics, realizing Blackie has retreated into the locket, as Basto mocks that he might lose a finger accepting it. Taking his sarcasm as a genuine promise, she latches onto Basto's leg, thanking him as he yelps in protest. Basio pats her head, reminding her that once they leave, she's the fearsome necro king again Puskai. And with a final wave from home, the new Agabert mercenary corps sets off for the capital. Dressed in matching white cloaks, the imposing group marches forward, their tiny leader perched on Basio's shoulders. But as they pass through the gates, Asti is stunned by the sheer scale of the city. It's a breathtaking sight, a sprawling metropolis she's only ever dreamed of from her past life. Their path, however, leads them through a desolate wasteland within the city itself. Basio gently pinches her cheek, explaining they have to walk. A carriage is a luxury they can't afford. Basto scoffs, bitterly recalling the bribe at the guild that drained every last coin they had. Nordich sighs at the bleak landscape, a consequence of mana stones, before urging them to move on. And with a sudden burst of speed, the old man sets a blistering pace, leaving Basto stunned by his stamina. Basto is surprised. The energetic little necro king who was just fine has suddenly collapsed. Asti is fast asleep in Basio's arms, and he figures it's just easier to move with her like this. As she drifts off, she dreams of a time long ago, back when she and her dad were together. He told her their arrival in this world was an accident, gently tying back her hair. He didn't know how it happened, but he promised they would keep searching for a way back home. With all the faith in the world, little Asti cheered him on, certain her dad could do anything, and he'd always hug her, promising to return home with his precious daughter. In her memories, he never once complained or showed how tired he must have been. But the dream shifts to a darker time, remembering how terrifying it was to be alone in the woods. She would have been lost forever, if not for the chance encounter with the man who saved her, Basio. It was her dad's stories that made this strange world feel safe, a comforting memory from a simpler time. But looking back now, she understands the immense burden he must have carried alone. Even in her sleep, a promise escapes her lips. "Just wait, Dad. I'll get you everything you need." With this newfound resolve, she awakens to a new journey, vowing that this time, she will protect him. Her new mercenary family finally arrives at the port of Fell City, a stop on the outskirts of the capital. Nordiche breathes in the salty air, a nostalgic smile spreading across his face. The place hasn't changed at all. Basto, meanwhile, can barely stand after walking for 2 days, wondering how this old man has more stamina than him. Basio cuts in, focused as ever. They need to find an inn, and Nordici suggests the Red Glove. It's a spot known for being crowded with mercenaries, making it the perfect place to discreetly search for Asti's parents. Nordicha takes the lead, heading inside to check for rooms while the others wait. Tanipang peeks over Basio's shoulder, wondering if their little necro king is still out cold. Basio can't blame her. He recalls her tiny frame struggling against the stinging desert winds. They'd even had to pull her out of a deep sand pit during their treacherous journey. The nights spent camping in the desolate wasteland were clearly rough on the little girl. But Tanipang suddenly panics. Other mercenaries are passing by, and he can't let them see their leader drooling. Basio quickly covers her face, noting that Nordice is sure taking his sweet time getting them a room. Growing impatient, Basto and Tanipang finally convince him to just go inside and see what the holdup is. Inside, they find a scarred, red-haired man explaining that a guest is checking out early. Basto looks on, confused by the delay, while Nordice listens with a curious smile. The man continues, scratching his head, saying the guest is just taking the morning boat to the capital. Suddenly, a voice calls down to the innkeeper, Rudy, from the second-floor landing. Basto's jaw drops in disbelief as he recognizes the man walking down the stairs. It's Tessaton, the legendary leader of Trabaga, the undisputed #1 mercenary corps. He casually stretches, teasing Rudy about lying that there were no rooms just to hike up the prices. Tessaton lets out a huge, unbothered yawn, clearly in no rush at all. But as he straightens up, his aura of quiet confidence seems to dominate the entire tavern. Basto feels a cold sweat. The man is just standing there, but the pressure is absolutely immense. Tessaton's sharp gaze sweeps over them, a silent but heavy assessment. His expression then shifts to a curious, almost friendly smile, as if he's noticed something interesting. But before he can say a word, one of his own men rushes in, yelling for his leader to hurry before the boat leaves. With a casual coming, Tessaton turns and follows his man out the door. The heavy tavern doors swing shut, and just like that, the suffocating pressure vanishes. Basio and Nordice finally let out a breath, admitting the man's presence was truly incredible. Bastos scoffs at the rumors of his noble yet vulgar swordsmanship, calling it nonsense from sore losers. But the innkeeper just laughs, confirming that odd description actually fits Tessaton perfectly. He playfully refuses to share any more details, instead telling them a room has just become available. Later, a familiar voice echoes in Asthi's mind, her father's voice, teasing her about business being good. A sweet memory surfaces, a dream of her as a tiny innkeeper and her dad as her only customer. But the gentle dream fades as she slowly begins to stir from her sleep. Her eyes snap open to an unfamiliar ceiling, and she sits bolt upright, finding Basio and Basto watching over her. Nordici explains their location as Asthi peers out the window, her eyes wide with wonder. They've finally made it to Fell City. Basio gives her a reassuring smile, telling her they have some business to attend to and will be back soon. Promising to be good, the tiny necromancer sits obediently on the edge of the bed. With the child settled, Basio's expression hardens. It's time to gather information. Their goal: find anyone in this bustling underground tavern who knows the name Luminen or Kim Young-soo. Left to her own devices, Asthi's mind drifts back to her father's words about the beautiful port city of Telasium. She gazes out at the ships in the harbor, humming a little tune, completely lost in her own innocent world. Downstairs, however, their search hits a dead end. Nordici asks about Kim Young-soo, but the man just scoffs, having never heard the name. Suddenly, an angry local confronts Basio, furious that after all this time, the first thing he asks about is the paladins. A flicker of recognition and trouble crosses Basio's face. It seems he has some history in this city. But before Basio can react, another member of their crew steps in, shoving the man back. He smirks, knowing exactly what kind of loudmouth this guy is. With a taunting grin, he accuses the man of just trying to act tough because he knows nothing. And just like that, the man cracks, desperately promising to tell them everything about the Luminen family. Meanwhile, upstairs, Asthi is still gazing out the window, lost in thought. Her eyes widen. Was that because she was just dreaming of her dad? Down on the street, she sees him, or at least, someone who looks exactly like him. Without a second thought, the little girl is a blur of motion, rushing down the stairs. She bursts out into the busy street, her small legs pumping as she chases after the familiar figure. But she suddenly stops, gasping for air, her face a mask of shock, because this isn't just someone who looks like her dad. In her heart, she knows without a doubt, it is him. She's chasing a member of the legendary Luminen family. Back at the tavern, the local spills everything he knows about the famed household of Holy Knights. He starts with the eldest son, Edmund, the brilliant tactical advisor. Then there's the second son, Leonardo, a decorated unit commander. And finally, the third son, Alexander, the esteemed head of the medical department. But the masked mercenary slams his hand down, completely fed up. He sneers that this is all common knowledge, berating the man for wasting his time on celebrity gossip. The three famous sons are public figures, but the man reveals the real secret: the fourth son's whereabouts are a total mystery. The masked mercenary listens, intrigued. So, no one knows where the fourth son is. The local immediately starts spinning theories. Perhaps he defied his family, ran away, and had a secret child. Just then, a commotion starts as little Asthi desperately pushes through the crowd. She's sweating, trying to get through, but the men she's chasing are oblivious. Besides, another local points out, the youngest Luminen just came of age. A 4-year-old kid? The math doesn't add up. But Asthi doesn't care about logic. She just runs as fast as her tiny legs will carry her. She lunges forward, grabbing onto a suitcase, only to be stopped by a firm hand. Back at the tavern, the angry local dismisses the idea entirely. A noble family like that could never hide such a scandal. All this useless gossip. The mercenary's eyes narrow as he cuts through the noise, realizing there's only one other possibility. Outside, the man simply brushes Asthi aside, wondering what he bumped into before walking away without a second glance. She hits the ground hard, but the pain is nothing. All she can think is that her dad is right there. Scrambling to her feet, she sprints towards the massive ship, her most precious person in the world about to leave. A desperate, panicked cry escapes her throat as she sees the gangplank being pulled away. Her scream seems to carry across the pier, and for a moment, the man she's chasing stops. He turns, a flicker of something in his eyes as he glances back towards the commotion. The image of her real father's warm, brilliant smile flashes through her mind, pushing her onward. But the man on the ship just turns away, continuing his path without a second thought. The massive vessel begins to pull away from the dock, the gap widening with every second. She keeps running, screaming the name everyone mentioned, Volantis Luminen, the head of the family. Finally, her little legs give out, and she collapses, wailing in utter heartbreak as the ship sails away. Back at the tavern, Basio is in complete denial, refusing to believe Volantis is a bad guy. The man dedicated his entire life to his wife, the famous Saintess Eleonora. Their love story was legendary, and with 4 children, everyone assumed their marriage was perfect. But Tanipang just scoffs at the naivety, snarling that no one truly knows what happens behind closed doors. He's seen it all before, cynically asking who they think most often requests poison for a cheating husband. He's sick of watching nobles pretend to be the perfect couple in public, while trying to kill each other in private. Then, a dark thought occurs to him: if Volantis did have an illegitimate child, it might explain what happened to the Saintess. But before he can finish his thought, Nordici bursts in, his face pale with terror, announcing that their lord has vanished. Panic ripples through the group as they realize Asti is nowhere to be found. Nordici frantically explains someone saw a child running alone towards the docks, and Basio's heart plummets. The sea. Basio's blood runs cold. He never told her to be alone. He just left her in her room. Tanipang bolts through the streets, pushing himself faster and faster. He curses his own foolishness. How could he leave a 4-year-old child by herself? The entire group tears through the city, a frantic blur of white cloaks. They scream her name into the wind, their faces twisted with sheer terror. But by the time they reach the docks, it's already too late. Asti has collapsed in defeat. Her mind flashes back to Tanipang's warning that the father shed find here wouldn't know her. And now, she finally understands the weight of those words. She was so naive, thinking that just having him alive would solve everything. But the crushing reality sinks in. What if her dad has completely forgotten her? A memory surfaces her father, telling her she was his treasure, his whole world. But in the present, that little girl is gone, replaced by a child sobbing in the arms of her new family. The mercenaries watch in utter shock, the grim reality hitting them all. Things can never go back to the way they were. And so Asti wails, a raw, piercing sound of pure desolation. Back at their inn, the heartbreaking cries continue to echo from behind a closed door. Basto peeks in, completely frayed, whispering that she's losing her mind, crying for her dad. Basio quickly hushes him, the 3 men standing by, utterly powerless to help. Basto can only scoff, calling her a silly brat under his breath. How can the feared Lord of the Dead be reduced to this? Whining herself to sleep. With their leader incapacitated by grief, the team discusses their next move, investigating the powerful Luminen family. Basio starts piecing it together, realizing the story has some serious holes. Duke Luminen is a war hero, constantly on the front lines, never out of the public eye. Basto chimes in: who in their right mind would dare to wipe the memory of a duke? The sheer impossibility of it all leaves them sighing in collective frustration. Nordici wisely suggests they shouldn't get hung up on the Holy Night clue. He figures they should wait for Asti to calm down before asking more questions, as she sleeps nearby. Basio watches over the sleeping child, his expression heavy with concern. She begins to cry in her sleep, reaching out and mumbling for her father. But as the others watch this heartbreaking scene, Basto's mind drifts elsewhere. He voices the uncomfortable question: if she finds her dad, what happens to them and their new mercenary group? Suddenly, Asti's dream plunges into a hellish memory, a voice echoing her father's begging someone to protect her. A red-haired woman named Livia is frozen in terror, her own body betraying her in the face of absolute chaos. She can only scream a name in despair as a horrifying winged demon descends upon her comrade. Through the eyes of a helpless infant, the world is a terrifying blur of monsters and men locked in a deadly battle. Her other guardian, a man named Alaric, bloodied and beaten, yells for Livia to get away. He pleads with her to abandon him and save the young lady, his voice a final, desperate command. Stealing her resolve, Livia clutches the bundled child, her hands scraped and bruised. She tries to whisper words of comfort to the baby, a promise to keep her safe from the surrounding nightmare. Then, she runs, pushing past her exhaustion and injuries, fleeing through the dark, crumbling dimension. Every pained breath is a reminder of her mission. She has to get the child out of this rift, no matter the cost. Livia finally stumbles, her body growing unnaturally cold as Asti wails, feeling the life drain away. But before she hits the ground, a man catches her, his face a mask of horror as he realizes she's been poisoned. Asti looks up into his eyes, and in her infant mind, a single, hopeful thought surfaces. It's Dad. Livia, however, only sees her commander, and she struggles to her knees, apologizing for failing her mission. She collapses completely, her last question hanging in the air. Did Alaric die? The commander's grim silence is all the answer she needs. With a weak, heartbreaking smile, she tells him it's all right, that he just needs to escape with the child. He reflects on their journey, on how a group of alley thugs somehow found themselves in a battle for the world. He thinks of all the names Basto, Alaric, Victor, all the comrades who gave their lives for this one little girl. Livia's gaze fades, her last wish a whisper. To have seen the young lady walk, pleading for her to live a healthy life. And with her last breath, Livia asks the child to be happy and smile with the commander. Her hand falls limp to the ground, a single tear tracing a path through the grime as her life fades. The infant begins to wail, and the commander can only hold her tight, his heart breaking. He runs, desperately trying to soothe her, promising that everything will be okay once they escape. But the memory turns into a nightmare as demonic shadows overwhelm them from all sides. Asti jolts awake with a scream, her heart pounding with a single terrifying thought. Daddy's in danger! She scrambles up in her bed, completely disoriented. That was such a strange dream. But it felt too real, a terrifyingly vivid memory that shakes her to her very core. Then, a name from the dream echoes in her mind. The dying woman had mentioned someone named Basto. And it all clicks, a memory of her father, holding her, talking about his comrade, Uncle Basto. She trembles, trying to process the nightmare. Was that a real memory from her infancy? Her father had once told her an accident was the reason for their situation, and now she fears that dream was it. But the details don't add up. He was a holy knight. So why did that woman call him commander? She thought finding him would be the end of her journey, but now she's completely lost. In a flash of light, Tanapang appears, asking if she finally met the man she was looking for. His sharp eyes take in her tears, and he knows the reunion didn't go as planned. Overwhelmed, Asti can only let out a heartbreaking sob. Through her tears, she admits that he was right all along. Just as he predicted, her dad had no memory of her, and she lost the courage to say a thing. Wiping her face, she feels utterly helpless, wondering what on earth she should do now. She buries her face in his shoulder, crying that despite it all, she just really wants her dad. Because no matter what happened, she loves him so much. Tanapang just holds her, letting her cry it all out. He then begins to explain a strange thing about his time sealed within her locket. Even asleep, he could hear her voice and her father's, feeling her joy and a world-shattering despair whenever she cried. He gently holds her, pulling her back from her sorrow for just a moment. It was her tears, back then, that called to him, that made him appear before her as a dragon, determined to help. And with that same determination now, he looks at her, his eyes glowing with ancient knowledge. He tells her that in this world, there is something called the law of destined regression, a terrifying concept where destiny is fixed. No matter how many lives one lives, their fate will almost always be the same. Tanipang drives the point home no matter the reason. Her father is destined to meet that same terrible end. The horrifying implication dawns on Asti. Her dad, he's going to fall into that district all over again? A memory flashes back, her father holding her as a baby, right before the so-called accident. An accident that was anything but a fated, violent clash against a monstrous winged demon. But her tiny hands clench into determined fists. No, not this time. She will stop. She remembers the whispers, the neighbors gossiping about how her father was struggling despite being so diligent. And she remembers her grandmother, yelling at them to shut their mouths and mind their own business. Little Asti had to endure their pitying looks, all because her father was suffering alone. She won't let him just walk away again, a lonely figure disappearing forever. With renewed fire in her eyes, she declares that here, in his own hometown, she'll make sure he lives to be 100. Tanipang's red eyes gleam with absolute confidence. He knows she has what it takes. A voice calls out, asking if she's finished crying, and Asti looks up to see her new companions. The door practically flies off its hinges as Basio and the others rush in, frantic that she hasn't eaten. But their blustering quiets down when the old man, Nordicha, says he has something important to ask her. Asti tilts her head, a little confused. What could they possibly want? They explain that first, they need some basic information to even begin the search for her father. She freezes mid-bite, suddenly wary, questioning why they need such personal details. Basio patiently clarifies that they simply don't have enough information to find him yet. And that's when it hits her, oh, right. She only ever told them his name. So, as her 3 new guardians lean in, she prepares to finally tell them the whole story. With a proud little fist pump, Asti announces that she and her dad lived in the Jongno district. Her 3 guardians stare back, completely and utterly lost. Jongno district? She happily continues, describing palaces, puppies, and how her Holy Knight father suddenly went to the Republic of Korea. As proof, she points to her old pink backpack from Hanbit Kindergarten, making Basio realize the strange patterns were actual letters. Basto looks over at Nordicha, admitting the old man was right. She's definitely not making this up. The 3 mercenaries are collectively having a meltdown. Her story is bizarre, but they can't sense a single lie. Basto, nursing a headache, decides they'll stick to the plan, head to the capital and ask the Holy Knights. He leans in, needing to confirm one crucial detail: her dad is definitely here in this world, right? Suddenly, a memory flashes in his mind: that man he saw earlier in the street. A flicker of realization crosses his face as he stares at Asthi. Could it be? Basto poses a question that hangs heavy in the air. If she finds her dad, will she leave them? The implication hits everyone at once. Does this mean the end of their new mercenary group, Agabert? Basio's face falls as he contemplates returning to the life of a wandering, disgraced mercenary. Nordicha is more stoic, stating he never intended to be a mercenary and would simply go back to the gate. But Basto can't accept that. For him, finding her father and her leading them are two separate things. Then, a brilliant idea strikes him. If she can't be separated from her dad, they'll just make him join too. Nordicha agrees, reminding them she doesn't even need to work. A dark attribute mage is a legend by default. Basto's eyes light up with ambition. With her as their mascot, they could aim for rank 1. Basio cuts in, bringing them back to reality by reminding them how dangerous their line of work is. The excitement drains from Basto's face as he concedes the point. He knows any father would oppose it. And Basto isn't just disappointed, he's desperate. He needs this mercenary group. He can't go back to living like a beggar. But unknown to them, Asthi slams her cup down with a resounding thud. She's made a decision. To ensure her dad lives a long and happy life, the Death Spirit King has to find him and protect him. And with the fire of a tiny revolutionary, she declares that Thai will now become independent from her dad. The mercenaries freeze, their minds short-circuiting at the word independent. Basio tries to process this, worriedly asking if this means she's giving up the search for her father. Frantically, she clarifies, of course not. She just won't ask him to take care of her anymore once she finds him. With a world-weary sigh, she explains she'll live her own life. A girl can't be wrapped in her dad's skirt forever. And while the other two are stunned into silence, Basto immediately cheers her on, proclaiming that 4 is plenty old enough to be independent. He even adds that Hes been on his own since he was 2, leaving Basio and Nordice wondering what kind of life Hes lived. Basto is all fired up, declaring that if she's truly independent, then it's time for Agabert to start earning some real money. He reminds her she's not alone. She's got him, Basio, and Nordice. The whole crew is here for her. A spark lights up in Asthi's eyes as she remembers her new title. That's right, she's the Necromancer King now. Pumping her tiny fists, she vows to do her absolute best, with Basto hyping her up right beside her. He then seizes the moment, pulling out a makeshift memorandum demanding they both sign an oath to never leave Agabert. Basio and Nordice watch, dumbfounded, as Basto eagerly shows her the contract he clearly just scribbled, complete with withdrawal restrictions. Basio sighs, knowing that document has absolutely no legal weight, but then he gets an idea. Maybe he should write one too. The mood stays light as Basto eagerly tries to get everyone on board with his little loyalty pact. But later that night, as Nordice tucks her in, a more serious question surfaces. Does Basto really hate all paladins? Basio, from the bed next to her, answers grimly, it's not just Basto. Most mercenaries despise them, a revelation that leaves Asthi speechless. Basio smirks, teasingly asking if her dad is one of those paladins, which makes Asthi furiously deny it. But the question lingers, troubling her. If Basto hates paladins, why was he with her father in that dream? Her mind flashes back to a memory of her father laughing alongside Basto and his other mercenary friends. She turns to Basio, her curiosity winning out, and asks why they all despise paladins so much. His playful demeanor vanishes. He explains it all started because the imperial family abandoned the mercenaries. Long ago, magic stones appeared, and from the cracks in reality, monsters poured forth, threatening to consume the continent. The Empire's solution? Abandon all but the capital, leaving everyone else to die while the knights protected the nobles. In those forsaken lands, the people rose up as mercenaries, learning to fight and draw power from the very magic stones that caused the crisis. While local lords and these new mercenaries shed blood to reclaim their homes, the imperial family offered zero support. So, Basio clarifies, it's not really about hating paladins, it's a deep resentment for the empire that threw them all away. To quell the rising tide of hatred, the imperial family made a show of expanding their borders. But of course, they only reclaimed regions that were strategically valuable to them, like the port of Phil City. Nordice, chiming in from his bed, explains that a place like this has always been a hotbed for mercenaries. And before the empire performed their grand ritual, the anti-imperial sentiment here was practically explosive. Asthi, completely lost, asks what on earth a consecration is. He calmly explains it's a holy offering meant to make a place sacred in the eyes of God. This ritual supposedly granted the city the divine protection of a being called Saradin, shielding it from monsters. So, Asthi wonders aloud, Did the magic stones just stop appearing? And he confirms that's what they claim. Sensing her skepticism, Nordice gently tells the little girl it's time to go to sleep now. But she just buries her face in her pillow, fuming at how cheap the Empire is, and wonders if even her paladin father would have despised them. Basio cracks a smile from his bed, amused by the little girl's fiery commentary. Asthi, absolutely fuming, declares that if the Empire has something so good, they should share it with everyone to stop all the fighting. Even Nordice has to agree with a tired sigh. The kid has a point. But as she starts to drift off, a new anxiety creeps in. She just hopes her father won't hate Basto when they finally meet. As the city slumbers, a voice reminds her they have Necromancer King's speech, training bright and early. The next morning dawns, and sunlight washes over the city's busy port. Out on the water, however, two men in a boat notice something is off. The waves are rough despite the clear sky. One of them, a young man named Raoul, points out the strange conditions, feeling a bit hesitant. But his companion, a former knight named Enzo, is eager to go, spurred on by rumors of a big catch. With their minds made up, they set off, rowing their small boat into the strangely turbulent sea. The journey seems to be dredging up old memories, back to a campfire where their father asked them a simple question about a knight's duty. The two boys, full of youthful fire, eagerly declared that it was to annihilate the enemy, of course. But their father just smiled, telling them that for him, things were a little different. His most important duty, he explained, was to protect the two of them, a solemn promise he'd made to their mother. He affectionately ruffled their hair, a simple gesture filled with warmth. Then he pulled them into a hug, their faces lighting up with pure, uncomplicated joy. But that perfect memory shatters, replaced by fire and terror as they scream for the father they're about to lose. That loss still hangs heavy in the air, the word father a ghost on their lips as the two grown brothers stand in grim silence. Now, they stand behind their mother, their new vow, unspoken but absolute. They will be the ones to protect her now. Suddenly, a thud from below the boat snaps Raoul back to reality. He whips around, sensing they've hit something unexpected. A strange energy ripples through the water, jolting their boat. There are no reefs here, so what did they just hit? But that mystery is for later. We're pulled into the past, where a harsh voice asks Marianne if she's lost her mind for refusing the consulship. She looks down, defeated, questioning how she could possibly take on such a role when all she's ever known is minor administrative work. Her own mother scoffs, asking if she plans to simply lock herself away and rot in her grief forever. She forces Marianne to confront a painful truth. Her behavior is dragging her sons down with her. Raoul has fallen in with a bad crowd, and Enzo has stopped eating for 3 days, following his mother's example of despair. The realization hits her like a tidal wave. They already lost their father. She can't afford to collapse and leave them truly orphaned. And so, for them, she stepped out of the darkness and into the halls of the Fell City Administration Bureau. Now she is Marianne Wavril, the young Marchioness, the consul of Fell City, a woman forged by loss into a leader. An aide confirms the city is stable, telling her to focus on the far more dangerous game of managing the imperial court. She knows the court sees her as a mere figurehead, but for the sake of her sons, she has found her resolve. Since arriving in Fell City, the boys have begun to heal, even picking up their swords once more. They come back from their adventures with smiles on their faces, and for a moment, she wishes this peace could last forever. But a sudden, deep tremor shakes the entire office. Marianne looks up, her brief moment of peace shattered by the growing disturbance outside. Down in the streets, a wave of panic erupts as citizens point towards the sea in terror. A colossal, shimmering magic stone erupts from the waves, crackling with raw, untamed energy. The city descends into chaos, guards screaming for everyone to evacuate, to run for their lives. Elsewhere, Asthi and her companions watch in disbelief, the sheer impossibility of the event leaving them stunned. As lightning crashes, a desperate voice cries out, begging for mercenaries to step forward before monsters overwhelm them all. A choked gasp escapes Marianne, the rain outside matching the cold dread flooding her heart. Her aide rushes after her, pleading for the consul to get out of the downpour, but she's already running. Her mind is screaming one horrifying thought. Her sons, the twins, went out to sea today and still aren't back. She tries to rally the mercenaries, but their captain shouts back that this is madness, a suicide mission into the unknown. The other mercenaries quickly agree, refusing to throw their lives away against such an impossible threat. A red-haired man named Rudy can only watch the chaos, running a hand through his hair in frustration. But then, a desperate voice from the crowd offers a sliver of hope, remembering the Travaga members were staying nearby. Marianne's eyes widen. Travaga, the #1 ranked mercenary corps. If it's them, maybe the city has a chance. That hope is immediately shattered when Rudy explains they left yesterday morning. It's too late to call them back. With their last hope gone, the citizens watch the monstrous waves batter their city, crying out that they can't just abandon their homes again. One of the old townsfolk finally breaks, screaming into the rain if there isn't a single mercenary willing to help. His desperation boils over into a grave insult, accusing them of being no better than the paladins who abandoned the city 100 years ago. That comparison strikes a nerve, and the lead mercenary with the white hair and eye patch has had enough of this senile old coot. With a vicious crack, he sends a boot flying right into the old man's face. He sneers down at the fallen man, mocking the town for being useless without their help. Grabbing the citizen by his collar, he snarls that they should be begging, and for daring to compare him to paladins, he'll make him pay. But a sharp voice cuts through the tension as Marianne steps forward, demanding he stop this at once. Her aide cries out in panic, shouting her title for all to hear. The consul. The hooded mercenaries look over, confused that woman is the consul? They had no idea. The mercenary leader points a dismissive finger at her, but Marianne stands firm, declaring her authority as consul of Fell City. The mercenary leader, Carl, bursts out laughing, finding the idea absolutely hilarious. He sneers at Marianne, remarking that with a face like hers, she's no consul. He suggests she'd make a much better mistress, horrifying the onlookers. But before he can say another word, a fist slams into his jaw with brutal force. His men can only watch in shock as their captain is sent flying. The attacker reveals himself, his eyes glowing with pure rage. It's Basio Derricks. Carl stares in disbelief, sputtering he was sure this man was dead and gone. Before he can recover, Basto is on him, pressing a blade to his throat. He snarls at Carl, telling him about the hell they endured to clean up his mess. Asti watches from under her hood, her eyes widening. So this is Carl. And for the first time, Asti gets a good look at him, thinking he looks really, really mean. Just then, a voice cuts through the rain, addressing a woman as the young Marchioness Wavril. Basto and Basio freeze. The Wavril family is one of the wealthiest in the entire empire. Her aide rushes to her side, trying to cover her from the downpour. But Marianne can only stare into the distance, her sons Raoul and Enzo heavy on her mind. A red-haired man apologizes for the disturbance, urging the consul to get inside. Asti sees her chance, telling Basto it's time for them to go. But Basto tightens his grip on Carl, warning the traitor not to even think about running. He and Basio glare with furious energy, promising their captain will make him regret everything. With that, Asti steps forward, her small frame casting a long shadow in the rain, and as the tavern doors swing shut, the whispers begin. Carl Worvin, meanwhile, can only seethe, utterly defeated and humiliated in the rain. The other mercenaries connect the dots, realizing those two brutes called that tiny kid their leader. The rumors about the infamous Necromancer king start to fly. They whisper about his monstrous power, so immense that even Basto struggles to keep up. But then there are the stranger stories, like how someone saw him crying in the streets just yesterday. Apparently, the Necromancer king is a complete and total eccentric. He supposedly pretends to be a pitiful child, only to cast wicked hallucinations on anyone who helps. What a twisted hobby. It seems all the truly powerful mercenaries are completely unhinged. But with that kind of power, they all agree the Agabert Corps is destined for the top 10. But for Carl Worvin, leader of the Death Hounds, this public humiliation is too much to bear. He screams at his men to shut their mouths. He stands shaking in the pouring rain, his mind replaying every failure. He remembers dealing with those useless paladins. Did he not pay them enough to do their job properly? And worse, that new Agabert Corps, with Basto and that mysterious Necromancer king, is already gunning for his spot. Absolutely not. He refuses to be overtaken. With a manic grin, he declares that his death hounds will be the ones to seize the Mana Stone. His underlings can only stammer in terrified agreement. Elsewhere, another leader, Consul Marianne Wavril, clenches her fist, lost in troubled thought. Her aide's voice barely cuts through the haze, forcing her to apologize for her distraction. The elder Nordici gently reminds her of their topic. He'd asked if there was any word from the imperial household. Nordice calmly confirms that an urgent dispatch has already been sent to his adjutant. But with the storm battering the city, a swift reply is simply out of the question. However, a small hooded figure has been silently observing this entire exchange. With unnerving insight, Asti notes the sadness on the consul's face and asks if she's searching for someone in the ocean. Marianne's carefully constructed composure instantly shatters. How could this child possibly know? Her voice catches in her throat, the words dissolving into a choked, desperate stammer. The trauma rushes back, just as it did when her husband's empty coffin was all that returned from the war. All this time, she's been desperately telling herself her sons, the twins, are safe somewhere. But her deepest, most paralyzing fear is that one day, they too will only return to her as corpses. The consul's cry is pure anguish, a mother's heart shattering as her aide tries desperately to help. But a clear, determined voice cuts through the chaos, as Asti declares with childlike certainty that they must be saved. Her crew, however, is less than thrilled. Basto throws his hands up, reminding her they were literally packed and ready to leave this cursed city. The consul's aide explains he only delayed their own departure because of Karl Worvin, questioning the madness of sailing into that storm. Basto eyes his tiny leader suspiciously, wondering aloud if this is her grand plan to get them all killed and raise them as undead minions. Even the grizzled Basio has to agree, pointing out that just surviving the storm would be a miracle, let alone tackling a mana siege. Nordice calmly lays out the facts. The stone is an unknown danger, and the only sane plan is to evacuate before nightfall. Then, Asti drops the bombshell, announcing with a bright smile that they aren't going to do the Mana Stone siege. Her three companions just stare, completely lost. What is she playing at? Didn't she just say they had to save them? Asti quickly clarifies her genius plan. They're not going to fight, just sneak in and grab the governor's sons. Then they'll come back and persuade the people to evacuate. Basio gives it a moment of thought, but Basto completely loses it, yelling about her recklessness. She hits them with a hard truth. Their new mercenary corps has no fame and, more importantly, no money. With a little wave, she beckons them all to lean in, ready to reveal the real secret behind her confidence. They might be broke, she whispers, but the governor is ridiculously wealthy. She recounts seeing the woman earlier, dripping in gold jewelry with impossibly smooth, wrinkle-free skin. It all clicks into place, a lesson learned from watching TV with her grandma. Rich people use money to defy aging. And just like that, the news reaches the consul herself, who can hardly believe that a group called Agabert is going to find her sons. With their mission set, a lone ship cuts through the torrential rain, sailing directly into the heart of the storm. As the new consul arrives in town, the whispers of the locals follow her through the rain. Meanwhile, on the choppy waters, Asti cheerfully announces their arrival to the governor. Marianne stares out at the raging sea, wondering how the leader of Agabert could be so reckless. On the ship, Basto pulls a rope tight, admitting to himself that he's actually a bit moved. He thought this was all just a scheme to make money, but he realizes the kid is taking this seriously. Asti's voice cuts through the storm, reassuring Marianne that her team is more than capable. Her unwavering confidence breaks through the consul's despair, bringing tears of hope to her eyes. Back on the boat, Nordice calmly confirms what their leader suspected all along. He reveals that Marianne is the sole heir to one of the 5 wealthiest families in the entire capital. Not only that, he explains, but since her late husband was a high-ranking official, this connection will be invaluable. And with that, their ship pushes off from the port, sailing directly into the heart of the raging storm. From the docks, Basto and the others wave them off, wishing them a safe return from the perilous journey. But as their ship cuts through the waves, a taunting voice suddenly echoes across the water. It's Karl Worvin, a maniacal grin plastered on his face as he asks where the little vermin think they're running off to. And right beside their vessel is another, larger ship, cutting them off in the violent sea. Back on the pier, Basio grabs a spyglass and his face pales. It's the Deathhound's mercenaries. He realizes they must be the ones who stepped up to transport the Mana Stone, and they're closing in fast. Asti's confidence shatters in an instant, her eyes widening in fury that villain is back to ruin everything again. On deck, Basto spots the enemy vessel looming through the storm, wondering what in the world is going on. He can't make sense of their taunts, shouting in frustration as the rain pours down. At the helm, Basio remains steady, telling Basto not to worry, he'll dodge whatever comes their way. But Basto can't even get a clear view of their pursuers. The enemy ship is just too massive, blocking his line of sight. Meanwhile, from his own ship, Karl Worvin smirks, thinking how perfect this is with no Necromancer king to interfere. He seethes with annoyance, wondering why these pests keep surviving and getting on his nerves. A wicked grin spreads across his face as he zeroes in on his target if Basto, the vanguard, falls here. Then the rookie Agabert mercenaries will be completely finished. He gives the order, proceed as planned. Basto looks up from the rigging, a flicker of alarm crossing his face as he senses the attack beginning. And just like that, the very ocean itself seems to rise up, a colossal wave threatening to swallow their ship whole. It wasn't a random wave. It was a targeted attack pushing their boat toward a massive structure in the water. Bastos' eyes widen in horror. They're being slammed directly into the city's magic stone. He sees their enemy's ship is already anchored to the artifact, a truly terrible sign. Back on the docks, Rudy and Nordich can only watch as Asti desperately tries to think of a plan. Her mind races in panic, trying to figure out what she can possibly do to help. Her necromancy is useless here. Her skeletal minions can't exactly swim to the rescue. She remembers how the others had told her and Nordicha to stay behind where it was safe. But seeing her friend in danger, her fear gives way to a simmering rage that villain Carl is at it again. Nearby, the consul Marianne Wavril watches the chaos with a look of pure dread. She sees cracks spiderwebbing across the magic stone, realizing with terror that monsters could break through at any moment. As these heart pounds in her chest, she has to help, but her mind is drawing a blank. Suddenly, a faint whisper cuts through the roar of the storm, calling out to her. From the dark, churning water, a skeletal figure begins to rise, its voice echoing in her soul. Her undead soldiers emerge, ready for orders. They've been waiting for their master. Out on the waves, Basio grips the ship's wheel, fighting the violent currents near the magic stone. Basto screams that they're being pursued, and the current is about to tear them apart. With the storm worsening, he shouts that it would be better to abandon ship right now. Basio, however, remains completely focused, his expression hardened by years of experience. Amidst the chaos, Basto suddenly looks at him, a question of confusion on his face. He asks why Basio lied, remembering he said he lost his daughter at 2, but he was with her until she was 7. Basio's mind drifts to the past, when Carl Worvin began pushing him onto battlefields, keeping him from his daughter. He fought for the rewards, telling himself it was all for his family, but in the end, he lost them first. The memory of his wife's desperate plea haunts him, her voice begging him to value heart over cold reason. Her cries are replaced by Basto's, who screams at him for taking too long to make a move. He yells at Basio to get them out of there before they all die, but the veteran's face is set like stone. With no warning, Basio's hand shoots out and grabs Basto with brutal force. He slams him down onto the rain-slicked deck, silencing his panicked shouts. Their situation was dire. The magic stone had shattered their ship, leaving them on a tiny fragment. Tying themselves to the stone's pillar was a desperate gamble to avoid being swept away. But for Basto, knocked down and freezing, the fight is over as consciousness begins to slip away. A violent shake and a desperate shout try to pull him from the brink. Basto jolts awake with a terrified gasp, the frigid rain stinging his face. Basio leans in, his voice urgent. There's no time for questions. Just get up and move. Before he can even process the words, an arrow slices through the air. It thuds into the wreckage, a hair's breadth from his head, a clear and deadly message. On a nearby ship, Rudy is furious, roaring that he was promised the sons would be left out of this. Basto stares into the storm-tossed chaos, completely lost as to what is happening. In the distance, a massive magic stone rift tears open, flooding the sea with raw power. On deck, a brutal fight has already broken out, swords clashing amidst the downpour. Basio finally gives him the short version. They're the good guys, and the ruthless deathhound mercenaries are here to kill them all. Raoul is stunned, realizing the mercenaries his mother hired are fighting amongst themselves even now. Basio screams at him to get moving. His brother is already on the big ship, but the violent waves make it impossible. He can barely keep his footing on the small boat. Just then, the turbulent water gives way to something far worse. Hungry sea monsters. His face drains of all color, a new wave of pure terror washing over him. A monstrous tidal wave crashes down, tossing his boat into the air like a child's toy. Thrown into the chaos, Raoul sees a tentacled beast lunging and feels his life coming to an end. A fleeting memory of his father's gentle smile flashes through his mind. Then, his mother and the crushing realization that he, the designated son, cannot die here. But his resolve is met with only destruction as the monsters tear his world apart. But as Raoul plummets towards the waves, a small figure appears in the sky above him. He's suddenly caught, his fall cushioned by a surprisingly soft pile of straw. It's Asthi, of course, grinning as she declares her catch a success. She confidently announces that the designated son is safe now that she's here to rescue him. Her necromantic power flares, and ghostly spirits rise from the ether, whispering their master's name. Following her command, they begin to raise a colossal, spectral ship from the stormy depths. With an adorable but determined look, she gives her next order. Find Basto's enemy and scold Carl. The phantom vessel emerges completely, a terrifying and magnificent sight against the dark sea. On a nearby ship, Carl Worvin stares in utter disbelief, demanding to know what that thing is. His men are panicking, shouting that the legendary Necromancer king has appeared with her ghost ship. Carl Worvin absolutely loses it, roaring that there's no way the Necromancer king could be here. After all, his plan was flawless. He personally made sure to destroy every single boat in the village. He'd baited Agabert with a tiny vessel, planning to bury them forever in the heart of the storm. Gritting his teeth, he seethes with rage that idiot Basto was supposed to be dead by now. But just as his fury peaks, a wave of unseen pressure slams into his men, sending them reeling. All across his ship, his mercenaries collapse, dropping their weapons as if struck by a ghost. Meanwhile, aboard another ship, a relieved Basto finally spots a familiar figure on the shore. He yells for Basio to look. Their captain, their little brat, has arrived on her own ship. On the docks, witnesses frantically recount what they saw, still trying to process the miracle. They explain how the tiny Necromancer king stomped her foot, muttered a few words, and conjured a warship from nothing. It wasn't just any warship. A tattered shipwreck rose straight from the depths. An ethereal boarding ramp then lowered itself from the empty, ghostly vessel. The tiny Necromancer king had whispered a single question. Who wanted to come with her? People shrieked in terror, realizing she had summoned a true ship of the dead. But amidst the chaos, the governor, Marianne, showed no fear. Her eyes filled with resolve. She stepped forward without hesitation, vanishing as if absorbed by a mana stone. In the next instant, she materialized on the other ship, grabbing her stunned son, Raoul. She pulled him into a desperate embrace, thanking God he was safe. Raoul could only stare back towards the docks, his mind reeling. That child is the Necromancer king? Aboard her new ship, Asthi stands among glowing runes, calmly acknowledging a message from her spirits. With a stomp of her tiny foot, Asthi demands the attention of every mercenary on the opposing ship. She warns them that her sailboat is now surrounded by a tide of the dead. If any of them are foolish enough to touch the abyss of silence within that tide. She pauses, letting the dreadful silence hang in the air. Then, she innocently pokes a summoned spirit, almost forgetting what the consequence was. Her demeanor instantly shifts, roaring that the chill of the deep will plant pure terror into their souls. The effect is immediate, as the mercenaries collapse, screaming in absolute, mind-shattering despair. Carl Worvin sneers at his pathetic men, convinced this is all just a childish bluff. But as he stands there mocking her, a spectral mist rolls across the deck. He turns around in a panic, suddenly realizing he's completely alone. Where did everyone go? A spectral hand emerges from the mist, its voice dripping with rage as it calls out Carl's name. The ghost of a woman fully materializes, its ethereal form wrapping around the screaming mercenary. It's the spirit of Basio's wife, accusing him of turning her and her husband into monster bait for his own sick amusement. Carl's face contorts in pure terror as he realizes who has come for him, stammering out her name, Eve. His bravado completely melts away, and he pathetically begs for forgiveness as the spirit drags him into darkness. Aboard the ship, the crew hears his final, desperate screams for Eve echoing across the water. Basio freezes in place, his mind reeling as he processes the impossible name he just heard. Raoul rushes across the deck, calling out to his captain, trying to understand what is happening. He runs towards his mother and brother, shouting for them to wait as chaos erupts. But Asthi is just beaming with pride, happy she got a new vroom vroom, or rather, a sailboat, much to Tanipang's horror. Tanipang can only stare, thinking to himself that this little girl is absolutely terrifying. He wonders if what Carl and his men are seeing are the actual souls of the dead. Asthi cheerfully confirms it, saying a spirit named Grimnir told her everything. On cue, a massive spectral skull erupts from the deck, announcing itself as the phantom master of this ship. She then proudly explains that this entire vessel is running on her own mana. Tanipang groans, realizing she's not just summoning ghosts, she's also acting as their translator now. As the phantom ship cuts through the water, it generates its own domain, a tide of the dead. And anyone caught in that tide, like the screaming Carl Worvin, will have their very soul linked to the spirit world. Basio finally snaps out of his stupor, the horrifying implication hitting him all at once, asking if his wife has become a ghost. The question stops Asthi cold, the gravity of his words finally dawning on the child Necromancer. Through Asthi, the spirit of Eve explains the agony of a soul trapped in the abyss, unable to move on. Her form solidifies, an embodiment of pure, lingering resentment. She looks down upon the broken man, seeing a reflection of her own suffering in his eyes. Asthi relays the ghost's message. She understands his world must feel like a living hell right now. But then, the spirit's expression softens, offering a gentle, reassuring smile. Asthi continues, explaining that Eve was trapped by a terrible grudge, but Lilia was not. The little Necromancer looks up at Basio, telling him that Lady Eve says he shouldn't worry. She passed on the ghost's final words. Lilia went to a good place, a place of peace. The weight of years of guilt and fear finally breaks him, and Basio collapses into tears, crying out his wife's name. In a final act of empathy, the spectral form of Eve embraces the weeping warrior, offering him a moment of solace. Eve's spirit realizes she can't place any more burdens on this child. Her time is over. With one last scream from Carl, she unleashes her full power, thanking the Necromancer King as she tears him apart. His soul is dragged down into the spectral depths, consumed by the monstrous denizens of the ghost ship's sea. Her final, fading wish echoes in their minds a plea to take care of Basto before she vanishes for good. Back on deck, the remaining mercenaries are in chaos, with some groveling and begging Basto for forgiveness. One of them desperately tries to explain, insisting they never wanted to turn on their brother, but his colder companion grabs him, telling him to shut his mouth unless he wants to end up like those monsters. And orchestrating this whole scene is Asthi, gleefully conducting her spectral orchestra like a maestro of mayhem. She happily explains the rules of her domain. When monsters touch the cursed current, they're instantly weakened, and when they die, they're simply reborn as her loyal servants, adding to her ever-growing undead army. One by one, the massive sea beasts are ensnared and dissolved by the spectral green tide. Observing from a distance, Tessaton can only stare in disbelief, muttering that the little girl is a crazy brat. His massive, blindfolded companion tightens the ropes on their captive, Worvin, announcing it's time for the next part of their plan. But another, more personal conflict is brewing on the deck of a different ship, ignited by a shocking declaration. Tessaton's mother grabs him, her eyes wide with terror, asking if Hez completely lost his mind. He calmly denies it, and Victor steps in to support him, insisting he feels the exact same way. With a fire reignited in his eyes, Tessaton announces their decision. They want to pick up the sword again. His mother recoils in horror, screaming that she'd rather die than allow it after all they went through to escape that life. She reminds them of the past, of the pain of losing their father, and how she fled to this city just to protect them. But Tessaton's expression hardens, as he quietly tells her that she knows that's not the whole truth. A painful memory floods back of his mother collapsing in tears, convinced it wasn't true. He continues, reminding her the real reason they quit the Knights wasn't because their father died. The truth is, it started with their grandmother, who was terrified they'd end up just like him. In a secret meeting, she laid her desperate plan before two young men, Raoul and Enzo. She swore she would save her daughter, Marianne, even if it meant using the boys she held so dear. The grandmother begged them, and the two could only listen in somber silence. It was a cruel plan, but seeing her own sons completely broken was the key. That shock was what finally brought their mother back to her senses, making her secretly happy to leave the Knights. Tessaton looks her in the eye, admitting that they were just as scared as their grandmother was. She was the one who pulled all the strings, even arranging their new lives as magistrates. Marianne clutches her chest, the painful truth finally settling in her heart. Her children were right. Tessaton rushes to clarify, his eyes wide and honest, insisting they never resented her for their decision. Through her tears, she admits she knows. She understood, better than anyone, that it wasn't about blame. Her mind flashes back to her husband, so proud of the two boys who were his spitting image, upright and full of life. But after his death, that light just vanished. It was more than grief. It was as if they'd lost all will to go on. She remembers watching them in their despair, a silent, helpless observer from behind a door. She knew how broken they were, but she felt powerless to stop them, unable to encourage them to keep fighting. Standing alone now, she can only wonder what their father would think of her. She imagines him beside her, a radiant spirit, and feels a crushing wave of shame, certain she would have disappointed him. The dam of her composure finally breaks as she realizes she hadn't been their support, but a burden, smothering them with her own fear. But her son Tessaton cuts through her spiral of guilt, taking her hands to reassure her. He tells her she was never a burden. Her very existence is what gives them strength. His brother Raoul embraces her from behind, explaining that she is the reason they want to pick up the sword again. They had thought putting down their weapons would bring her peace, but they can see she's still trembling. Looking up with tear-filled eyes, she asks if this means they're returning to the Holy Knights. But Tessaton's gaze is fixed on a new path entirely. No, he says, they're going to follow those people. His mother and their companions can only stare back, completely bewildered by his sudden declaration. He finally decides it's time to tell them the truth he's kept hidden for so long. A truth about why their father really died in battle at the border of the Empire. It all began during a siege on a massive monostone, but a smaller fragment broke off and fell right over a residential area. Tessaton explains the problem. The Manastone was outside the Empire's official boundaries, and since the Holy Knights served the Empire, getting permission to cross the border was a political nightmare. His father argued passionately that they had to intervene to protect the residents, a sentiment some higher-ups shared. But in the end, the imperial family flatly rejected their request, a memory that still stings his mother. He clenches his fist, lamenting that if only the permission had come sooner, things would have been different. He bitterly compares it to the present day, as the authorities drag their feet responding to the Manastone in Pearl City. But hearing this, his mother's eyes fill with a new kind of light. She finally understands. As a ghostly ship appears on the horizon, she whispers that this is what true holy power looks like. The crowd on the docks erupts, recognizing the ship of the Necromancer king, Agabert, returning victorious. It was the mercenary group who protected them, and the people hail them as the true heroes of the day. Tears of gratitude stream down the faces of the citizens, their voices choked with thanks. Nordice steps forward, gently holding back the crowd and explaining their leader needs to rest. Held safely in Basio's arms, Asti suddenly feels the immense drain on her body. Her limbs feel like jelly. He looks down at her with concern, reminding her that mages must always be wary of mana depletion. Just then, a well-dressed woman steps through the crowd, requesting a moment with the members of Agabert. She introduces herself as the Magistrate, here to formally express the city's gratitude to its saviors. It was their power, the impossible golden ship that appeared from nowhere, a feat commanded by the small child now resting in her comrade's arms. She smiles, clarifying her title as the Archon of Pearl City, and repeats her offer of deepest thanks. Asti's eyes light up as she realizes what this means. The city's leader is here to pay her debt. With a gentle smile, the Archon invites them to follow her. The streets erupt with cheers for Agabert and their leader, the Necromancer King. Asti, completely spent, nestles securely against Basio's chest. Her consciousness fades into a dream, seeing her father's silhouette on a distant ship. She falls into a deep sleep, remembering his promise. She protects the people, and he will always protect her. Far away, on the open sea, another vessel cuts through the waves under a setting sun. On its deck stands Tessaton Baronio, staring out at the horizon, his mind clearly elsewhere. He can't seem to shake a strange feeling from his encounter back in Pearl City. He remembers hearing a child's cry for her daddy, and turning to see a little girl, who looked right at him with tear-filled eyes and a brilliant, unsettling smile. A memory surfaces of Alaric teasing him, asking if he secretly had a child stashed away somewhere. Of course, he'd laughed it off. His mercenary corps was a gathering of strays, a family forged from nothing. So why was he so shaken? Why was he haunted by the voice of a child he'd never met, by a face stained with tears? He tries to push it down, telling himself she was just an orphan wandering the dangerous docks. But the worry won't let him go. He turns on his heel, striding to find a communication orb as a sailor recognizes him as the Trebega captain. He needs to send an urgent dispatch to the Pearl City Archon, and that means contacting the Imperial Court. The sailor offers him the device, and Tessaton internally groans. He absolutely loathes dealing with the court, given their history. But this unsettling feeling, this premonition, it's something he just can't ignore. As he takes the receiver, the sailor makes small talk, asking if he's ever seen the infamous Necromancer King. The sailor mentions the Agabert mercenary corps was in town, and one of his boys claims to have spotted the so-called king. The sailor continues, saying the boy claimed the fearsome Necromancer King looked just like a little kid, an adorable child with bright yellow hair, and Tessaton's eyes widen in disbelief. The sailor adds that the disguise was so good, you'd never know it wasn't a real child. Then the name Agabert echoes in his mind, and everything clicks into place with a jolt. That little girl, that crying orphan was her? His whole world just turned upside down. He suddenly recalls a report from Livia, information he had received but completely overlooked. A slow, incredulous smile spreads across his face. He's been completely and utterly played. What a bizarre, roundabout way for the so-called Necromancer King to start a power struggle. And while her reputation shakes the city, the king herself is sleeping soundly like a baby. Elsewhere, Agabert's fame is already spreading as two young men eagerly ask to join their ranks. But Tannipang smirks, reminding the two young hopefuls they looked pretty helpless out on the sea. The shaggy-haired recruit readily admits it, knowing they're only alive thanks to Agabert's intervention. He recalls Tannipang's fighting style so blindingly fast and efficient, he desperately wants to be his student. The other recruit agrees, remembering how easily those other mercenaries were dispatched. And then there was Basio, a monster of a man whose raw power and heavy strikes left him in awe. He then grows concerned, wondering why their captain still hasn't appeared. Did they make a bad impression? As they spiral, thinking they're nothing to her, the legendary Necromancer King is simply taking her afternoon nap. Tannipang sees his opening, leaning in with a sly grin, telling them it wouldn't matter even if she hated them. He puffs out his chest, declaring that the captain listens to everything he says, because he alone has all her favor. The two recruits can only stare, their minds completely blown by this incredible revelation. But Tannipang is cut off by Basio, who boldly claims that he is the one the captain truly relies on in a crisis. Nordich just chuckles, chiming in that they're both wrong after all. You can't possibly ignore the value of experience. Basio tries to argue that he and Tannipang are the fighters, but the old man insists he's just stating facts, and the two new recruits can only watch, completely frozen as the founding members bicker over who's the favorite. Their minds race, picturing the awesome power of the leader they pledged to follow, the Archmage, the Necromancer King. Meanwhile, That very same legendary leader is blissfully unaware, sleeping soundly in her bed. In her dreams, a voice asks her a simple question. Who does she like the very best? Her mind conjures up her loyal companions, all transformed into a delicious-looking feast, begging for her attention. She just mumbles something in her sleep, lost in her own world, completely oblivious to the commotion. The recruits look down at their new uniforms, a profound realization dawning on them she is their savior. And just as they call her their savior, Asti's eyes snap open, pulling her from her slumber. A radiant, ethereal figure looms over her bed, greeting the one who saved her life. The little necromancer, now looking more like a toddler than a king, can only stare in shock. The being introduces herself as Tessaton, the sea goddess, who came to offer thanks before she hibernates. Asti is completely baffled. Thank her? For what? She was just sleeping. But Tessaton reminds her of the battle, of the moment she shattered the Mana Stone prison. The little girl racks her brain, but she's sure there was no one inside that stone. And that's because, Tessaton explains, she wasn't just in the stone, she was the Mana Stone itself. Asti's mind is blown. The princess she was meant to save was a giant magic crystal this whole time? The goddess clarifies that she is the sea god of the Western Sea, an existence much like a spirit. A spirit? Asti's tiny brain short-circuits, trying to process the word. Her only reference point is from her past life, a friend named Hyunwoo, who was obsessed with a mobile game. He would always brag about his collection of spirits, showing off his powerful S-class cards. It was a gacha game where his rich older brother just bought him all the best skins and characters. And now, seeing a real spirit before her, she realizes those silly game characters were based on reality. The goddess smiles gently, explaining that the source of all spirit power, of nature itself, was the mother tree. But one day, that great tree began to lose its power, its golden leaves withering as its roots rotted in darkness. Asti immediately panics, asking what happened. Was the mother tree hurt? But Tessaton's form begins to waver. She's already delayed too long and is starting to fade. With her last moments of manifestation, she reaches out to the little girl, offering a gift of gratitude. It's an item forged from the very essence of the sea god herself, known as the Sanctity of Oblivion. A beautiful bracelet forms on Asti's arm, and her eyes go wide as she learns its legendary power, the ability to erase memories with a single touch. Tessaton smiles, certain this gift will serve the little girl well, but she has one final piece of wisdom to impart. The young spirit resting inside her locket, she reveals, will be the one to guide Asti to the person she seeks. With those final words, the sea goddess dissolves into a shower of light, leaving the girl to ponder her message. Asti sits in stunned silence. Blackie, her little dragon companion, he wasn't just some gacha game character. He was a real spirit who could lead her straight to her dad. A fire lights within her as she grabs a notebook, quickly scribbling down her new life plan. Part 1 feels totally achievable now. Find her father. She's filled with a renewed sense of confidence. But Part 2 is a much bigger problem, uncovering the truth behind the dying mother tree and the nature of spirits like Tanipang. Her mind races with a huge question. If the sea goddess was a Meiwan, are all mana stones actually spirits? She quickly dismisses it. After all, the other stones she'd checked before were completely empty. But then, a thought sparks. She hasn't been able to check every stone, has she? Grabbing her pen, she adds a new mission to her list. Investigate the mother tree and find out the truth about mana stones. Her own neat handwriting brings back a memory of kindergarten, where her teacher praised her skills. A sudden wave of melancholy washes over her. She just wants to be a normal kid again. It's not that she doesn't love her new friends Basio, Basto, and Nordice mean the world to her, but she also dearly misses her old neighbors, the kind grandmother and the auntie down the hall. She misses her teacher, her friends. The loneliness of her grand quest suddenly hits her hard. But then, a smile breaks through the sadness. She's not alone. She bolts out the door, eager to find her new family. She finds Basto and leaps into his arms, giddy with a new discovery about mana stones. But her excited explanation trails off as she notices they're not alone. Her entire crew freezes, their faces contorted in pure, unadulterated panic. Two young men stand in the doorway, staring at the bizarre scene with wide eyes. And that's when it hits her, oh no. The administrator's sons. She completely forgot to be the terrifying Necromancer king. Basto snaps into action, clutching her tight and screaming at the boys not to move an inch. The two newcomers are so stunned by the outburst, they just stand there, frozen with their mouths taped shut. With that, Basto scoops her up and bolts, leaving the two boys standing alone in the grand hall. They're left to process what they just saw, trying to make sense of the chaos. It was just a child. They realized the fearsome mercenary leader was just a little girl. A very cute child, at that. The thought hangs in the air, a silent, stunning realization. But back at their hideout, Asti is having a complete meltdown, wailing that she's messed everything up. She was supposed to be perfect, but she slipped. Her crew can only stand and watch, utterly defeated. Basto buries his face in his hands. Of course this happened. A 4-year-old's acting has its limits. But Basio is already thinking ahead. This isn't her fault. The real problem is how to manage those 2 witnesses. Asti, however, is spiraling, imagining the worst. What if they spread rumors about her? Her mind flashes to horrified townsfolk discovering the truth. The Necromancer King is just a little kid. The whispers would turn to accusations, the city branding them all as frauds. Then the guild would step in, ordering them to disband for breaking the rules. All her work, her only chance to save her father, would be gone in an instant. Then, a memory surfaces the bracelet on her wrist. It can erase memories with a simple touch. Her first thought echoes out loud. She should just get rid of the 2 witnesses, much to her crew's absolute horror. Clutching the bracelet, her face set with grim determination, she decides to fix her mistake. The 3 grown men collectively short-circuit, their faces turning red with sheer panic. They leap in front of her, practically begging their tiny leader to stand down. Absolutely not. Basto is losing it, yelling that she's a 4-year-old who has already seen far too much violence. But Asti ignores their pleas and makes a run for the door. She has to test this power now. He snatches her mid-sprint, demanding to know what happened to the kind kid he once knew. She struggles to get free, but he holds firm, screaming that he refuses to watch her kill someone. And it finally clicks for Asti. Oh. He thinks she meant kill them, leaving her utterly speechless. Held in Basto's arms, she looks up with wide, innocent eyes, confused by their assumption. No, of course not. Tanipang steps in, piecing it all together as he begins to explain what really happened. He recounts how the magic stone was a spirit that gifted her a powerful artifact, the Bracelet of Oblivion. Asti excitedly confirms it, gushing about a beautiful spirit princess named Sararin. The name instantly rings a bell for Tanipang, remembering Nordiche mentioning it earlier. The others confirm it too. Saradin is the name of the local god protecting Pearl City. So, to be clear, she freed a literal god trapped in a magic stone? Asti just beams and shows off the bracelet. Basio turns to Nordiche, his mind reeling, as if commanding the dead wasn't enough. The old man's eyes widen with a heavy realization. It's not just some magic item. Asti has stumbled upon a relic, a treasure of immense rarity found only in the heart of a siege. Nordiche explains the grim reality. There's a strict rule that no mercenary group is allowed to privately own a relic. But as Basto points out, Asti already has one, which means the powers that be will just take it away. Asti protests that it was a gift, but Basto reminds her of the church's policy to collect any relic found. In fact, the only mercenary group to ever find one, Travaga, voluntarily surrendered theirs. And everyone knew that donation was anything but voluntary. Basio grimly agrees. If even the unyielding Travaga was pressured into giving in, the church won't hesitate with them. Asti panics that can't happen. She needs the bracelet to erase the governor's son's memories. Her hand tightens around the very artifact that could solve one problem while creating a much bigger one. But a confident smile spreads across Basto's face as he agrees with her. They absolutely can't let that happen. His solution is simple. From this moment on, only Agabert will know this relic exists. Basto then drops a bombshell. Raoul and Enzo, the governor's sons, actually came to them wanting to join Agabert. He lays out a cunning plan. They accept the new recruits and test their loyalty. If the boys ever try to leave, that's when Asti will use the bracelet to erase their memories of her. Her eyes sparkle with realization it's the perfect solution. This way, they can expand the mercenary group without ever worrying about her identity leaking. But Asti pipes up with a valid concern. What if they just secretly run away? Basio flashes a confident grin, asking if she really thinks anyone could sneak past them. Basto adds with a sly look that they'll catch anyone who tries and drag them right back to her. With her fears completely soothed, Asti happily agrees to the plan. And so, the two new recruits are sat down and given the official story about their young, mysterious leader. The boys process the wild story. So she's the legendary Necromancer king, just disguised as a child. But far from being intimidated, they're completely smitten. Knowing the truth just makes her seem adorable. Enzo calmly summarizes their understanding of the one condition for joining this crew. Basto chimes in, explaining they already tested the Bracelet of Oblivion and confirmed only Asti can wield its power. Basio adds the crucial detail. The bracelet isn't just a manual trigger, it can have conditions set to activate automatically. A shiver runs down Basto's spine. A relic that can perform selective memory wipes, no wonder the church hunts for these. Basio looks the new recruits dead in the eye, asking if they can accept this as the sole condition for joining. Basto leans in with a slightly unhinged grin. warning them to choose carefully since he'd hate to threaten them. But Enzo doesn't even flinch, a cool confidence on his face as he readily agrees. With genuine smiles, both he and Raoul bow their heads, eagerly asking her to cast the spell. With a final push of encouragement, Asti steels herself, though a shiver runs through her tiny body. She reaches out, placing the bracelet of oblivion on Enzo's hand, silently apologizing for this necessary evil. Bracing herself, she closes her eyes and unleashes the artifact's power. A blinding flash of blue light engulfs her, pulling her consciousness into a sea of another's life. She's floating through Enzo's memories, a disorienting and overwhelming torrent of his past. She finds what she's looking for, his memories of her as Tyr, and begins weaving the spell's conditions. The spell is set. If he hates her or leaves Agabert, he'll forget her true identity entirely. Back in reality, Enzo blinks, feeling completely normal, and casually asks her to do Raoul next. But before she can, Basio catches her hand, a surprising request in his eyes. He smirks, saying he never plans to leave, but he'll take the spell too, just to put everyone at ease. He confidently declares that the spell will never have a reason to activate on him. Asti's heart melts. Basto and Basio truly see her as a lifelong comrade. Feeling emboldened, she gets ready for the next person, but suddenly realizes someone's missing. She whips her head around in confusion. Where did Grandpa Nordicha go? The next day, Asti is sitting alone in her room, the events of last night still fresh in her mind. Suddenly, the door opens, and Nordiche walks in with a grave expression on his face. She rushes towards him, asking where he'd been, but he stops her with a serious pronouncement. He drops a bombshell. He thinks it's time to tell Marianne Waverell, the administrator, about her. Her power is simply too immense, he explains, and keeping it hidden is becoming a liability. If the church discovers she has a relic, they'll tear the world apart to learn her identity. If the church and the imperial family set their sights on her, her power alone won't be enough. But Asti just looks back with wide, innocent eyes, admitting she doesn't really understand. Nordic sighs and cleverly switches tactics, deciding to use an analogy she'll get, Puppetmon. Her face lights up. Yes, legendary Puppetmons make you super strong, but then the dark implication hits her. He's saying she is the legendary prize, someone powerful people would want to capture and control. She protests that she isn't a Puppetmon, but Nordixie's voice is grim. There are many ways to make someone a puppet. They could take hostages, use hypnosis, or even manipulate her mind with drugs. He asks her directly, if they did that, could she truly fend them off all by herself? The little girl's confidence vanishes, and she has to admit the truth with a small, quiet no. And that, Nordiche concludes with a gentle smile, is precisely why they need the help of the Waverell family. And so, they arrive at the governor's office, where Marianne Waverell greets the little captain with a warm smile. Asti lays out the whole plan, the conditional magic, hiding her identity, all of it, until her father is found. Without a moment's hesitation, Marianne takes the child's hand, promising her complete support. Asti can hardly believe it, but Marianne assures her it's true, though they should probably keep it quiet. After all, she explains, since her sons, Raoul and Enzo, chose to follow Asti, their family's fate is now tied to hers. She pulls the little girl into a gentle hug, telling her she will now be like a child of her own. The sudden warmth reminds Asti of her own home, of being called family, a daughter, a granddaughter, and finally, the immense pressure breaks, and she lets herself be a child, complaining about how hard the journey was. She babbles on about being hungry and even scared of the sea monsters, finding a patient ear in Marianne. But for Marianne, this isn't just charity. She sees her own sons, knowing they too must return to the battlefield, and her heart aches with a familiar anxiety. Marianne gently tells Asti that having her sons in the Agabert group brings her immense relief. Clenching her little fist, the child feels a surge of determination. She promises with all her might that she will take good care of Raoul and Enzo. With a warm, knowing smile, Marianne thanks the little Necromancer king for her words. Later, tucked into bed, Asti thinks to herself that Grandpa was right, telling Marianne was a good thing. But her thoughts drift, and a powerful wish echoes in her mind. She wants to become stronger. She remembers Marianne's grief, wishing for a world where monastones didn't cause such pain. A world where Mr. Basto and the guild officials would have never suffered. A few days later, that wish for strength gets a major boost as her entire crew stares in shock. A line of extravagant carriages awaits them, a gift from Marianne to repay the captain of Pearl City. As the carriages depart, Basto is lost in a memory of a playful argument from long ago. His mother's voice cuts through the recollection, asking if he's really going to the armory district for a new sword. Before he can answer, she tells him to wait, leaving a young Basto momentarily confused. She returns holding a magnificent longsword, explaining that its blade was bent in his father's last battle. She hands him the weapon, noting that he's left-handed, just like the man who wielded it before him. A memory of his father's gentle smile flashes through his mind. He was a man who believed a sword was meant for more than a display case. With his friend Victor by his side, a younger Basto accepts the heavy legacy and promises his mother he'll return. The memory fades as the carriage pulls away, and in the present, a joyful Asti waves goodbye to their new benefactor. But Marianne is already back at her desk, wasting no time as she picks up her quill. She begins to write, initiating a formal search for a legendary holy knight who made a great name for himself. A knight whose name she believes is so unique that he should be easy to find. And in another time, another place, we see exactly why this man is a living legend. The order goes out across the land. Find the holy knight from the capital, Kim Young-soo. The request soon reaches another noble house, a letter arriving from Marianne herself. The lady of the house can't help but wonder what that little girl has gotten herself into this time. Meanwhile, in their carriage, that very name echoes in the air. Kim Young-soo? Asti searches her memories. Completely baffled, she's never heard of a holy knight with a name like that. Her mercenaries sit in silence, letting their young leader work through the puzzle. Basio and Basto exchange a quiet look, sensing the weight of this moment. But a flicker of recognition sparks deep within her, not as Asti, but as Tyre. And then it hits her, her father never told her his real name, a bombshell that leaves her companions reeling. The memory floods back, taking her to a kindergarten classroom in her past life during a drawing contest. The teacher cheerfully gets their attention, announcing it's time to write their names on their artwork. She double-checks that everyone remembered to show their parents the notice from yesterday. The kids are instructed to carefully copy down the family names their parents had written for them. Little Tyre watches the other children, a bit amazed at how many names everyone seems to have. Her teacher then turns to her, kindly encouraging her to write down her dad's name as well. But in her mind, he was only ever Dad, or the nice bachelor from down the hall. She looks up from her drawing, admitting she doesn't know it. He came home late, and she forgot to ask. The simple, innocent answer leaves her teacher momentarily speechless. The teacher kindly takes little Tyre by the hand, assuring her they'll find her dad's name together. She explains that his name must be on the kindergarten registration forms, leading the way to the office. After a moment of searching, she pulls out the official document, a triumphant smile on her face. Tyre squints at the paper. Sounding out the letters, she sees Kim Young-soo. A spark of pure joy lights up her eyes as the name clicks in her mind. Her dad's name is Kim Young-soo. Later that day, her father came home early for once, and she was waiting, drawing in hand. She proudly showed him her artwork, beaming that she finally knew how to write his name. He crouches down, a warm smile spreading across his face as he confirms it for his little princess. She then explains with a child's simple logic. Since has Kim Young-soo, the teacher said she must be Kim Astier. Her father's smile softens with a hint of something deeper, agreeing that for now, that's what they'll write. He explains that Kim Astier is what they call her in a place called Korea. The little girl tilts her head, wondering if she has another name, and he smiles, teasing that she will when they return to their hometown. Her eyes go wide with a startling realization. Is she not a Kim, but a Park? Her father melts at her adorable logic, scooping her up in a huge hug and promising to watch cartoons. But looking back now, Asti is filled with a deep sense of regret for not understanding the weight of his words. If only she had asked back then, asked about that other name, that other home. As she sleeps in Basio's arms, the rest of the group ponders that very mystery, the true identity of her father. Basto voices everyone's confusion, completely baffled by the name of this strange land, the Republic of Korea. Basio lists their scant clues, strange clothes, weird writing, and the fact that he was a paladin, while Nordiche adds the main problem is his lost memories. But Victor has a lead, revealing their primary suspect for the memory wipe, the Luminen family, which is why their next stop is the imperial capital. Basto's eyes widen as he clarifies the name, not just any Luminen, but Valentus Luminen. The man is a living legend, a paladin revered by all, with sons who followed in his heroic footsteps except for a fourth, whose fate is unknown. He wonders aloud if a family that prestigious would truly go so far, all while Asti sleeps, completely unaware she's the subject of this dark rumor. As the carriage rattles through the night, the group silently debates the grim possibility. After all, you never truly know a family's secrets. The steady clatter of wheels slows to a stop, with Nordiche looking out into the quiet darkness. Basio suggests they take a quick break, spotting a lake nearby where they can refill their water flasks. But Basto has a much more pressing need, grinning sheepishly as he admits he has to relieve himself. Not to be outdone, a flustered Victor quickly stammers that he'll go along as well. Tannipang, in his tiny form, pops up completely lost, asking where everyone is suddenly rushing off to. Hez bluntly told they're going to take a leak, and the men head off into the woods, breaking the tense atmosphere with a dose of reality. Bastos snaps at a mortified Victor, telling him to just get it over with. But Victor is spiraling, wondering if mercenaries really do this together regardless of gender. He frantically looks for a place to hide, but every bush is too low, every tree too small. Bastos smirks, mocking his shyness and reminding him they're comrades who will see everything eventually. Victor's mind short-circuits at the casual talk of washing up in puddles. Basto keeps pushing, asking if he expects them to wait turns, while Victor internally panics about Vale being a woman. He tells the young master this isn't some fancy mansion with warm water on tap. A flustered Victor finally seems to accept his fate, realizing he's just another mercenary now. He starts to apologize for his rookie attitude, but Basto isn't done with him yet. With a firm grip, Basto starts dragging him along, sending Victor right back into a full-blown panic. Having found their spots in the woods, Victor tries to maintain some dignity, while Basto just turns his back. Basto scoffs, wondering aloud how a former knight could have such terrible restroom etiquette. Completely scandalized, Victor can only stammer as Basto grabs at his cloak. With a cutesy sticker on his own cloak, Basto calls Victor a crazy bastard, totally unaware of the irony. Just then, Basio and another mercenary show up, catching Basto in his weird, aggressive stance. Suddenly, it's Basto's turn to blush, realizing with dawning horror that Victor is, in fact, a man. With that awkwardness behind them, the crew finally arrives at their destination, the Popol Rosa Armory District. Asti is amazed by the massive factories, but Nordice points out the black smoke comes from the legendary Furnace of the Beginning. Their leader, Basio, hands his warhammer to Nordice, telling the others to find lodging while he gets it fixed. He gives one final order. Don't get comfortable, because they're leaving the moment his weapon is ready. Asti innocently asks why they need to leave so quickly, having only just arrived. Basto explains that the local factory manager is a legend, infamous for his immense pride and a terrifyingly short temper. He nervously adds that it's best for them to get out of here as soon as possible, clearly having some bad history. Watching him, Asti can't help but think Basto must really despise the man. And then Basio returns, explaining that the manager told him to come back in 2 months for the repair. The entire crew is stunned as Basio continues, saying he couldn't possibly wait that long and asked for the weapon back. Turns out, the manager flew into a rage, refusing to let his masterpiece be touched by some low-quality blacksmith. Victor completely loses it, screaming that Basio just let the man steal his weapon, while Asti wonders why. She's then told a shocking truth. This factory manager is so powerful that not even the Emperor can order him around. Just then, Nordice steps forward, calmly revealing he knows the manager and will try talking to him tomorrow. Basio casually suggests that while they're here, everyone might as well pick up a weapon for self-defense. Marianne immediately objects, horrified at the thought of giving a weapon to a child who could get hurt. But Basio, with a straight face, clarifies he was thinking of something simple, like a poison dart gun with paralyzing toxins. And after a moment's thought, Marianne's entire demeanor flips. She decides that yes, a 4-year-old is definitely old enough for a poison dart gun. A flashback reveals her logic. A younger Asti learns that Marianne's own sons, Raoul and Enzo, were wielding swords by age 7. The poor girl's brain short-circuits, trying to process this insane standard for childhood development. In that memory, Marianne holds her close, promising to treat the little commander as one of her own. Touched by this, Asti vows that she'll make sure to protect Raoul and Enzo in return. And that's when it all clicks into place for her, with fierce, adorable determination. If she's going to protect everyone, then she's absolutely going to need that poison dart gun. With her backpack stuffed with gems, Asti declares that since Basio saved them, she'll protect them all now. Basto is immediately charmed, kneeling down and joking that he'd gladly accept, since Hez completely broke. Basio, ever the pragmatist, just smirks and chimes in that he won't be refusing her offer either. Puffing out her chest, Asti promises to be a reliable commander for her newfound family. The word family catches Victor completely off guard, but Asti confirms it with a resounding yes. Her conviction comes from a lesson her grandmother taught her long ago, surrounded by loving neighbors. She learned that family is forged in the heart, and as far as she's concerned, everyone here is family. The hardened mercenaries are left stunned as their tiny commander professes her love for them all. With tears welling in her eyes, she finally reveals her master plan, to buy 100 poison dart guns. Basto is left speechless, completely overwhelmed by the fierce, unconditional loyalty of this little kid. But her declaration is met with a furious outburst from Basio, who grabs her head, yelling at her for being an idiot. She screams right back, insisting he's the one who gets hurt all the time, and that he should just focus on not getting hurt himself. Asthi storms off, calling him a fool, leaving the mercenaries to marvel at how affectionate their little commander truly is. With a weary sigh, the rest of the group decides it's best to follow their leader. She immediately gets to work packing for their expedition, grabbing essentials like rope and a grappling hook. As they walk, Basio, now cloaked, can't help but ask why she's packing rope, to which she explains it's for escaping out a window. He's left completely baffled by her logic as they finally arrive at a grand building, fronted by a gleaming suit of armor. Before them stands a legendary set of plate mail, the core Krajaris, radiating a powerful presence. Asthi's eyes widen in absolute wonder as she recognizes the famous artifact on display. She tugs at Basio's cloak, gushing over how pretty it is, and he can't help but soften and agree. But her excitement immediately dies when she spots the sign, "Not for sale." Still, she can't help but stare, whispering to herself that she wants it, simply because it's so pretty. Basio scoffs, asking what she'd even do with it. But Asthi fires back that it's enchanted to change size for its wearer. Caught off guard and proven wrong by a child, Basio can only cough awkwardly into his fist. As Asthi sulks, Tanipang watches from the side, a look of pure exasperation on his face. Their quiet moment is broken when a worker approaches, asking if she is the commander of Agabert, the Necromancer king. She nervously confirms her identity, completely unsure of why this man is suddenly seeking her out. The scene flashes back to a roaring furnace, where that same worker reports to his superior. He explains that Basto and the Agabert mercenaries are in the armory district, looking for a temporary weapon. But this news only enrages the factory manager, who slams his hammer down, roaring that Basto deserves a brutal beating. The manager is absolutely livid, roaring that Basto dared to abandon his weapon, and now demands he be thrown out. The worker tries to reason with him, pleading that they're losing important customers because of this attitude. But the elder couldn't care less. He won't forgive anyone who treats his creations carelessly, and he screams for them to be kicked out now. And so, back in the present, the worker forces himself to tell them to leave and put down all the weapons they've chosen. Asthi and Tanipang are completely blindsided, staring up in total confusion at the sudden aggression. The worker steels himself, convinced he can't be fooled by appearances. The true enemy is a giant man covered in fur. He glances down at the tiny, pouting girl in front of him, the rumored Necromancer king. This can't be right. The poor guy is sweating bullets, utterly confused. Elder Barugan has a temper, sure, but he's never been this nasty to customers. What in the world could be making the legendary blacksmith act so irrationally all of a sudden? The manager's final threat echoes in his mind. If they don't kick them out, every one of them will be stripped of their top disciple status. The worker can't let 10 years of hard work go down the drain over this. With no other choice, he lunges for their cart, screaming for them to get out. Marianne is absolutely livid. Kicked out and refused service? What kind of business is this? But for Asthi, this sudden, unfair rejection triggers a painful, long-buried memory. She was just a little girl, being yelled at by a cold shopkeeper to get out of her store. The woman complained on the phone about the kindergarten kid leaving fingerprints everywhere. All little Asthi could do was stand there, feeling small and utterly unwanted. The owner just pointed to the no kid sign, refusing to even listen. All she had wanted was to use the pocket money she'd saved up to buy a little bit of chocolate. She remembers thinking she wasn't being loud, she hadn't touched anything at all. But her mind reels back, her younger self wondering why they hadn't done anything wrong. She was just a little girl, confused and hurt by the sudden hostility. The shopkeeper's furious voice had echoed over the phone, demanding she get out. And though she was small, a fire ignited within her, screaming that this was completely unfair. Later, her father sat with her, gently reassuring his little princess that she was not at fault. He explained that sometimes, mean adults just take out their anger on easy targets. He looked at her seriously, telling her never to accept such behavior as if it were natural. Because it's always okay, he said, to resist unfairness. Back in the present, the armory worker tries to dismiss them, claiming his hands are tied. But with her father's words echoing in her heart, Asthi grabs the rope, refusing to be pushed around. She digs in her heels, refusing to let go until they return Basto's hammer. The armory worker, completely fed up, gives the rope one final, powerful yank. But he drastically underestimates his own strength, sending the tiny commander flying. Tanipang and the others can only watch in horror as she hurtles through the air. She crashes directly into a priceless suit of armor, shattering the display. Asthi lies stunned on the floor amidst the wreckage as her crew shouts her name. Enraged, Tanipang grabs the worker, who stammers that he never expected her to be thrown like that. Suddenly, a furious roar cuts through the chaos as the legendary Elder Barugan appears. His eyes are fixed not on the child, but on the broken armor, where the heart of Krajaris is missing. The manager erupts, ordering a complete lockdown to find the vanished artifact. The workers snap to attention, scrambling to follow their furious boss's orders. Amidst the chaos, Basio rushes to his commander's side, checking to see if she's all right. As Asti gets her bearings, a glowing red gem tumbles out of her little pink backpack. She picks it up, innocently wondering if this shiny rock is the core of Krajaris everyone is screaming about. But before anyone can react, the priceless artifact cracks and shatters in her tiny hand. The legendary Elder Barugon can only stare, his rage melting into pure, slack-jawed horror. A strange, powerful aura suddenly begins to swirl around the bewildered little girl. Asti feels a jolt as her own strength is violently drained from her body. A massive wave of crimson energy erupts from her, flooding the entire workshop. Her crew and the workers are caught in the blast, their faces frozen in utter shock. Basio and Basto can only watch in horror, screaming for their commander. But Asti is already gone, consumed by the crimson light and losing consciousness. With a crack of lightning, she's suddenly somewhere else entirely, a modern street soaked in rain. She stands there, a tiny, lost figure, her mind reeling in total confusion. But the street signs, they're familiar. This is Jongno-gu. She's back in her old world. The fantasy realm has vanished, replaced by towering skyscrapers under a violent storm. With nowhere to go and no one to turn to, she begins to walk through the downpour. Her small footsteps carry her through the cold alien cityscape. A faint sound draws her attention to an old boombox left on a lonely bench. It crackles to life, a voice on the radio commenting on the severity of the storm. Something is deeply wrong here, this isn't just a memory. She knows this path through Jongno-gu, but the streets are twisted, like a maze. No matter which corner she turns, she always ends up right back where the radio is. A tear rolls down her cheek as she whispers the names of her friends, lost and alone. Suddenly, the world bleeds red, the rain turning to blood around her. Back at the armory, Nordice screams in confusion, wondering what in the world is going on. Just moments before, the factory manager had lunged at him, and both vanished in a flash of light. One of the workers cries out in horror, recognizing the phenomenon they've been devoured by Krasar's subspace. Basio grabs the man by his collar, his patience gone, demanding he explain himself now. The terrified worker reveals the truth. Krasar is the very monster that attacked this place 35 years ago. The worker tells Basio that calling Krasar difficult doesn't even begin to cover it. Basto listens in horror as the man recounts how an entire company of holy knights were reduced to skeletons in an instant. They weren't just killed, they were trapped in a twisted reality and driven to slaughter each other. But inside that very subspace, Asti's desperate search finally ends. She's found it. With a determined step, she moves toward the source of her torment. A colossal figure erupts from the ground before her. It's the factory manager, demanding to know what the Necro King did to Krasar. He bellows that his name is Vergen, and accuses her of creating this illusionary subspace. Asti just looks up, utterly confused, wondering what a subspace even is. Back in the real world, Basio completely loses it, screaming at the worker for not warning them their leader could be dissolved. And in a flash of memory, we see a tiny Asti, holding the very red core of the monster in her hands. The terrified worker insists he had no idea, yelling that Krasar's core was never meant to break so easily. He begins to explain its dark history, the red mist that once devoured 200 holy knights. Out of that entire bloody ordeal, only a single man ever managed to tear his way out and escape. The name he speaks sends a shockwave through Basio and Basto, Valentus Luminen. It was this legendary hero who donated the core. Despite warning everyone, it was a terrible omen. He even defied the Emperor's command, tossing the cursed artifact into a furnace to be destroyed. But years later, the core was discovered in the furnace's taff-hole, completely unscathed. Not even the legendary Elder Vergen could put a scratch on it, forcing him to forge the armor they see today. But the workers' real fear isn't just that the core fell out of the weapon. It's the impossible fact that it shattered and then created its own subspace from nothing. The terrified worker insists he's just as confused as everyone else. He explains, the armor has been dropped and knocked over countless times without a scratch. The only explanation he can grasp is that the Necro King cast some kind of spell on it. After all, the only way out of a subspace is to tear through it from the inside, a legendary feat. He completely breaks down, already mourning his boss, sure that the Elder will return as a corpse. Meanwhile, inside the strange dimension, Asti is seething with frustration. Nordica has lost all hope, but Asti refuses to give up, telling him they have to find a way. A memory flashes through her mind. These people are her family now, and she will protect them. Fueled by this resolve, she knows they can't just stand around and wait for death. That's when Basto chimes in, suggesting they send a rescue request to the mercenary guild. The factory manager reveals this isn't the real world. It's a subspace, an illusion created from someone's inner fears. He remembers the moment the demon's core cracked and fog consumed them. In that instant, he knew what was coming, a subspace that would manifest his greatest terror. He was certain he'd be sent back to that day, the one that haunts his memories. But the world that formed around him was completely alien. He quickly realized this nightmare wasn't meant for him, and so he sought out the Necro King. Asti looks up, asking him how they're supposed to escape before the subspace consumes them. He explodes in frustration, shouting that he can't possibly know his way around her fears. Their only chance, he explains, is to find the spatial veil from within and tear their way out. But he's completely baffled by the strange buildings and flashing lights, wondering why their companion is just standing there dazed. But instead of the Necro King, he knows, Barugon is confronted by a tiny, crying child demanding to know where they are. She puffs up her cheeks in a full-blown tantrum, her demeanor completely alien to him. Asti refuses to tell him anything, defiantly calling him Mr. Manager as she clutches a strange pink bag. She then starts pointing out vroom-vroom cars and streetlights, things he's never even heard of. With surprising strength, she grabs his collar, blaming him for chasing away someone named Tia and causing this mess. Barugon's confusion finally snaps into suspicion. This isn't just some lost kid. He demands to know who she really is. For a moment, the childish act falters, and Asti seems to shrink back, clutching her bag. But the old blacksmith isn't fooled. He declares that even cooped up in his armory, he's heard the rumors. Rumors of a vile mage who toys with dark magic, a mercenary with the power of 3 men. He leans in close, a grim smile on his face, revealing that he isn't afraid because magic is useless in Krazer's domain. A sinister red aura erupts from Barugon as he drops the pretense, demanding the Necro King reveal her true purpose. He grabs her, roaring with fury, questioning how she destroyed Krazar's core and who ordered the hit. Asti is completely stunned, her childish facade shattering at the impossible accusation. The narrative shifts, introducing a powerful entity from the past, the Frost Mercenary Association. A young mercenary recalls hearing about it, an organization meant to connect mercenaries with state jobs and ensure their safety. Basio, however, remembers it differently, a bitter memory from before he joined the Deathhounds. He recalls the day the association made a pact with the imperial family, seizing control of all state commissions. The other mercenaries are outraged. This new system would give priority to affiliated groups, locking everyone else out. Whispers turn to angry shouts as they realize the obvious. Joining would cost a fortune they didn't have. It was a corrupt system from the start, and they refused to join, vowing never to trust such an organization. But as Basio recalls, their fears of corruption were completely groundless. Against all expectations, the Frost Association was fair, doling out missions based on merit. This built trust, and a younger, more idealistic Basio burned with hope, ready to join them on the spot. Back in the present, a high-ranking official in a pristine garden listens intently to a report. The voice on the line explains the situation is critical, requiring a mobilization order for the top mercenary groups. She understands. A reaction from the core of Krageris is no small matter, and they must act fast. The real question is, will the stubborn leaders of the top 3 groups even answer the call? Especially when the leader of Travaga, Tessaton Baronio, and his unique eye are absolutely essential for this mission. They'll have to be pressured, though she knows he'll likely refuse out of sheer arrogance. With a grim resolve, she gives the order. Issue the mobilization and make it public. The call ends, her mind already focused on the next step, contacting Travaga. But as she moves, a dark crimson stain on her white robes tells a different story. She trails blood across the pristine floor, grimly admitting she should have gotten first aid. But there's clearly no time to spare for her own wounds. She approaches a grand window, raising a hand as a colossal, glowing butterfly answers her call. A brief, weary thought escapes her. Maybe holding this many positions of power wasn't a good idea. Outside, her energy coalesces, pulling rocks and earth together into a massive golem. The Stone Guardian stands for only a moment, before teleporting away on its silent mission. With her work done, a hidden system activates, and water begins to rain down from the ceiling. Every last trace of blood is washed away, leaving the perfect scene completely undisturbed. On a battlefield littered with the dead, a great sword is driven into the ground. The commander, bloodied and exhausted, dismisses an order, stating he has no time for it. His subordinate desperately protests, reminding him that a man named Barugon is trapped. Meanwhile, in a storm-swept city, a hulking man bellows for the Necromancer King to appear. The weight of the commander's decision hangs in the air. If Barugon falls, the blame is his. But he scoffs at the warning, sneering that he'll just attend the funeral later. The real problem, he explains, grabbing his sword, is the manipulative Frost Association. With a bitter smile, he wonders aloud when he became nothing more than their attack dog. As his resentment boils, lightning flashes through a window far away. The summoning continues, the bearded man's chest glowing as he calls out once more. And through the darkness, a hungry, distorted voice demands its prize to show itself. The one summoned is a tiny, toddler-sized Asthi, clutching a kindergarten backpack in confusion. She finds herself teleported into an empty classroom, surrounded by children's toys. It becomes clear the man who summoned her, the factory manager, was corrupted by a strange fog. He's possessed by a being called Kor Krajaris, calling for the Necromancer king while drooling over a delicious meal. Asthi recognizes the voice and knows she needs his core, but she's trapped and can't call her allies. Just as despair sinks in, a nearby tablet suddenly flashes to life, its screen glowing brightly. The sudden light startles her, a fleeting thought of her father crossing her mind. She realizes it's the teacher's pad, having activated on its own. A calm face appears on the screen, ready to read her prepared letter and begin an interview. A memory floods her mind, a time when she was just a little girl named Tyre. The man on the screen, it's her father, in a video message he recorded for his child. She remembers being upset that he'd been gone for days, not wanting to go to kindergarten, but her grandmother insisted, telling her that being a good girl would stop her dad from worrying. While she was away, her friends had an observation day, where their parents all sent in video letters. The kids were all buzzing, begging the teacher to play Tyre's dad's cool video one more time. The teacher had turned to her then, asking if she finally wanted to see the message he'd left. But in her childish sadness, she had refused, stubbornly turning away from the screen. Now, in the dark and empty room, the video plays anyway, forcing her to finally face it. The memory plays, her father's face on the screen, about to say what his daughter, Tyre, means to him. And then the words that seared themselves into her mind. Honestly, she's a burden. The scene shifts abruptly to a concerned subordinate, worried their reputation is being tarnished. His commander sits wounded nearby, sword in hand, listening to the lecture about their prospects. The subordinate presses on, explaining this is far more than a matter of simple pride. He reminds him that every single holy weapon they use is forged with immense power. And now that the master craftsman is dead, any supply issues will be blamed entirely on them. The commander finally looks up from his wounds, a dark humor in his eyes. He gives a bloody, defiant grin, declaring he couldn't care less what happens to the imperial family or the church. He scoffs at the complaint, revealing he hasn't been idle at all. He was busy dealing with a massive mana stone on the border that the so-called Holy Knights completely abandoned. One of his comrades confirms it. They're the ones who had to clean up the mess left by the cowards. The strategist, Alaric, sighs in understanding, knowing their leader fought for 3 days straight without rest. The commander just trudges off, feeling filthy and demanding 2 days of uninterrupted sleep. But a moment later, the energetic Livia is already bugging a weary Alaric about their next move. She drops the jokes and leans in with a juicy rumor she overheard about someone getting trapped with the Necro King, the very same weirdo who runs around pretending to be a 4-year-old child. The commander stops dead in his tracks, turning back to demand exactly who she was talking about. A story unfolds, a distorted recording of a voice calling a little girl named Tia truly devious. The voice claims taking care of her was a nightmare, that her father never knew a day of peace. On screen, the source is revealed, her own father, Valentus, complaining about her childish needs. The feed glitches and distorts, a corrupted memory playing out for all to see. Another figure, a teacher, chimes in, sighing that the child was just so immature. Then comes the final, soul-crushing blow from Valentus. He realized he could never love her. The real Asthi, just a small child then, could only scream in denial, kicking out in fury. She wailed that it was all lies, that her dad would never, ever say something so horrible. But the recording ends on her father's chilling smirk as he blames her for everything. The twisted voice of her father claims that if it weren't for Tia, they never would have ended up in Korea. The memory glitches, showing a man desperately trying to save a dying woman in his arms. Her father's narration continues, cold and full of regret, not for their deaths, but for ordering them to protect Tia. He declares it's obvious why her mother abandoned them. She was, and always has been, a complete nuisance. Back in her room, Asthi rocks back and forth, desperately trying to convince herself that it's all fake. She clutches her head, tears streaming down her face, her little heart shattering from the cruel words. But her private despair is obliterated as a massive, wild-eyed man smashes through the door. His face is a mask of pure, manic glee as he roars that he's finally found his target. He bellows out her title, the Necro King, as little Asthi is left frozen in absolute terror. But the chaos is abruptly interrupted by a guard screaming that a portal has opened right outside the armory. Basio and Basto flinch, caught completely off guard by the sudden alarm. Just as the guard warned, a massive, glowing magic circle materializes in the courtyard, and from its light emerges a man with a chilling aura leper, ranked second among all mercenaries, the leper of greed. He takes a look around, pulling down his mask with a sigh, muttering how grim this place is. Had been thinking of finding a new supplier, but now has been summoned to rescue the very guy he wanted to drop. Hez told that the monster core didn't revive, but its lingering magic created a subspace. Semantics. Lieber couldn't care less. Clenching his crimson gauntlet, he's just here to smash it. He turns to our heroes with pure mockery, sarcastically wondering what they'll do since Travaga isn't here to save the day. But another top ranker suddenly appears, spatula in hand, Alanis, the third-place mercenary. Lieber can't believe it's her. She just laughs, saying she was about to cook when the summons came. He cuts her off, demanding to know why everyone is so hung up on needing Travaga for this. One of her hooded followers explains that Tessaton's eye is required to even see the subspace. Alanis just smirks, getting ready to spill the tea on their oh-so-important number one. She reveals Tessaton is busy at the border, completely worn out and ignoring the association's calls. Apparently, a neighboring emperor made him a better offer, and Elaine warns that he has no idea how terrifying real power is. Her playful demeanor vanishes, replaced by pure annoyance at having her day off ruined. She scoffs at the so-called golden age of mercenaries, leaving Leber to silently absorb the grim truth of their situation. Elaine continues her bitter monologue, lamenting the state of mercenaries. Even if they bribe and bow, they're nothing more than hunting dogs for the nobility. But that monster Tessaton acts like he owns the world, conquering mana stones at will. He refuses to give up his number one rank, strangling the supply of large-scale commissions for everyone else. Her eyes narrow as she tells Lieber it's about time someone put him in his place. The plan is simple. They'll just make a show of searching, and the mission's failure will be blamed entirely on Travaga. But elsewhere, the bearded summoner slams his fists down, demanding to know what Asthi is doing as she collapses. Tanapeng screams her name, desperately trying to snap her out of the blinding light consuming her. Lost in a torrent of tears and power, she can only whisper his name, completely overwhelmed.